In his previous life, he was a mere salaryman, an anime nerd. But one day, after waking from slumber, he found himself reincarnated into another world. Now, as the heroines Eurysthea and Serena cry out in fear before a monstrous beast, he stands with them, his past life a distant memory. They look up, calling his name Hermes-sama. It is the world of his beloved game, Lovely Sorcerer. He was not reborn as a hero, but as a simple mob character within that world, now poised for action. While the game's protagonist, Atlas, engages the enemy head-on, Hermes calmly stands with the heroines. "Are you two all right?" he asks, assuring them, "Leave your recovery to me." His competence earns their admiration. The scene shifts to a memory, as Hermes wonders where it all truly began. He recalls it was probably back then, about half a year ago in his previous life, when he first came across the romantic action RPG known as Lovely Sorcerer, or Love Sword for short. The game had been a massive success, a shining star in the declining eroge industry. True to its name as a romantic action RPG, it featured a robust combat system, a rare combination for the genre. He remembers becoming so completely engrossed that he started a strategy website for it. He recalls the simple satisfaction of updating the site, noting tips for other players, such as how to perform a stun lock on an enemy. His thoughts drift to the site's comment section, recalling the excitement of the community as they discuss the game's main character, Atlas. But even then, a deeper realization settled in his mind. No matter how godly a game is, players will eventually grow bored and dissatisfied. He sits at his desk, contemplating this fundamental truth. In his previous life, he sat hunched over a desk, the glow of a screen illuminating his tired face. He mused that the combat in the game had become formulaic, wishing the characters could act with more freedom. He leaned back, realizing he had nearly completed Lovely Sorcerer. All that remained, he noted while looking at his phone, were the tedious tasks required to earn the final trophies. A sudden burst of manic energy seized him. He laughed, grabbing his own face and shouting at himself to pull it together, insisting that he wasn't done with the game just yet. His phone screen showed the time was past 3 in the morning. Despite the late hour, he wished he could keep playing forever, his resolve strengthening to acquire the last few trophies. That memory fades. Now, in a different body, he lies fully clothed on a bed, one arm draped over his eyes as if he had collapsed from exhaustion. His fingers twitch as consciousness slowly returns. A groggy thought surfaces questioning the time. As his eyes flutter open, he is greeted not by a familiar ceiling, but by the sight of an ornate canopy, the sound of birds chirping from somewhere outside. The unfamiliar sight jolts him into a sitting position. He looks down at his own clothes and a luxurious bed, realizing with a start that this lavish room was not his. Confusion mounts as he swings his legs over the side of the bed. He tries to make sense of it, remembering clearly that he had gone to sleep after a long night of gaming. He wonders if he somehow oversees. Standing in the middle of the opulent room, the sheer strangeness of it all overwhelms him. A single, chilling thought forms in his mind. Could he have been kidnapped? He resolved to go outside to determine his location. He threw himself against the large double doors, rattling them violently in their frame, but they refused to give way. Suddenly, a latch clicked and one door opened, revealing a young maid. She seemed startled, asking why Hermes-sama was standing there. He stared back, not recognizing her at all, which caused her expression to crumble in shocked disbelief. Her voice trembled as she told him her name was Fran, confused because just yesterday, he had been calling out to her like normal. Her panic grew as she asked if he truly couldn't remember, flustered by his formal way of speaking. She explained that while he had been in a carriage accident the previous week, he had seemed perfectly fine until now. Observing her genuine distress, he internally concluded that she couldn't possibly be a kidnapper. Tears streamed down her face as she revealed his full identity. Hermes von Lunicilia, the Duke's son and the next in line for the family. She sobbed that he must have suddenly lost his memories, lamenting it as a cruel joke. The title, The Duke's Son, struck him with force. The revelation sent him stumbling backward, clutching his head as a sharp pain shot through his skull. Alarmed, Frank cried out, asking if he was all right. He moved past her toward a large mirror and stared at his reflection. The face looking back was not his own. It was flawlessly beautiful, with delicate features that could almost seem feminine. He was captivated, even managing a small, disbelieving wave at himself. The sight sparked a wild thought. Had he become incredibly good-looking? A sudden, painful flash of images assaulted his mind. The carriage accident Fran mentioned, his head striking the ground, and the faces of the Duke and Duchess. He reeled, wondering what was happening to him. He clutched his head, realizing the flashes were not his own experiences, but memories belonging to this handsome young man, Hermes. From the chaotic influx, a name emerged, the Tricerdis Kingdom. That name triggered a connection to his former life. Tricerdis Kingdom was the setting of the Otome game, Lovely Sorcerer. An image of a game guide for a community event appeared in his mind's eye. As a dedicated player, he knew with certainty he wasn't mistaken. He was inside the game. He touches his own face, a tremor of disbelief and dawning excitement running through him. The realization solidifies in his mind as he whispers the implications aloud. That means That means His thought continues, picturing a vast, mountainous landscape under a cloudy sky where winged creatures soar freely. He has been reincarnated. The mental image expands to a magnificent, sprawling fantasy city built into the mountainside, confirming his greatest suspicion. He is in the world of lovely sorcerer. Overcome with shock and exhilaration, he throws his arms out wide. He can't believe it, that a plot straight out of a light novel has actually happened to him, reincarnating him into his most beloved game. He collapses back onto the bed with a sigh, his eyes falling on a framed photograph of his tired, former self. He speculates that he likely died from overworking in his previous life and wonders if this new chance is some kind of grace from a god of another world. Sitting up, he examines his reflection in a mirror. A grim realization dawns on him. It seems he's been reincarnated as a mere mob character. The name Hermes von Lunicilia belongs to this body, but it's a name he doesn't recognize from the game's main cast. He turns away from the mirror, clasping his hands with a look of resolve. He concludes that there's no point dwelling on it. He has no choice but to accept his new reality. Just as he resigns himself to this fact, Fran's voice calls his name. Turning toward the doorway, he offers an apology to Fran, but internally panics when he sees her suspicious expression. She's looking at him as if he's some kind of sketchy person. As she asks if his head is still all right, he realizes he's in trouble. He quickly tries to cover for his bizarre behavior, forcing a laugh and claiming his memory had just lapsed for a moment. Fran, however, looks alarmed, questioning if his strange monologue was just him stretching things. Hermes agrees that's what he was doing, but Fran's response surprises him. She notes that it's only been a week since his accident, so lingering after effects are to be expected. Internally, Hermes is shocked that she so readily accepted his flimsy excuse. He watches the maid, Fran, wipe a tear from her eye, relieved. He internally concludes that if she is going to accept his story so readily, there is no point in arguing. It is a clear advantage for him. Turning to her, he formally announces that he has completely remembered being Hermes von Lunicilia and apologizes for causing her to worry. As she stammers, he internally celebrates, realizing he now has a convenient excuse to use from now on. Fran, however, looks at him quizzically, remarking that he seems to be acting differently than usual. Her observation makes him wonder how the original Hermes acted and spoke. Clearing his throat, he attempts a more imperious tone, insisting he is the same as always. He then dismisses her, asking to be left alone now that his memory has returned, though he internally frets that he might be coming across as a chinibu, someone with grandiose delusions. Despite his awkward performance, Fran accepts his act completely. She bows deeply, expressing her relief that Hermes Sama is back to normal. He stands stunned, shocked that she believed his act so easily. Having accepted his recovery, she informs him that the master is waiting for him in the dining room and that he should join them after changing his clothes. He gives a simple acknowledgement, and she turns to leave the room. The moment the door closes behind her, he lets out an audible sigh of relief, the tension visibly leaving him. His relief quickly morphs into overwhelming embarrassment. He throws himself face first onto his bed, pounding the mattress in utter mortification over his theatrical performance. He screams into the pillows, aghast at himself for having spoken like a Chuyuni. He reaffirms his situation. He has been reincarnated into the world of the game, lovely sorcerer, but not as a main character, only as some unknown person named Hermes von Lunicilia, surrounded by the game's heroines in his imagination. However, looking at it another way, he realizes his situation might be for the best. It is a shame he is not the main character, he thinks, picturing the game's protagonist, Atlas. He sits up on his bed, contemplating the difference. Had he been reincarnated as the protagonist, he would be forced to follow the game's scenarios, getting close to the heroines. While that sounds enviable, a mob character has no such destiny. They are not pushed by the world's narrative. He is free to simply enjoy this world that he loves. He idly wished he could check his status, just like in the game he remembered. To his shock, a translucent screen flickered into existence right before his eyes. As if in response, the screen displayed his full name, Hermes von Lunicilia. It was undeniably a status screen, listing his age as 15, level 1, with all his basic stats, strength, vitality, agility, and intelligence, at a value of 10. He recognized the format instantly. He pondered the screen's appearance. Perhaps it was some kind of reincarnation bonus, a special perk for being reborn in this world. He then wondered if he was the only one who could see it, or if this was a common ability for everyone. His eyes drifted down the list of his magic proficiencies. He noted with confusion that he had an aptitude for all attributes. This was strange. In the game setting, each person was supposed to have only one. Still, he concluded it was a lucky break, as having a status window would make it much easier to plan his future. He then connected this strange aptitude to a key piece of game lore. Since his proficiency was listed as 10 instead of 0, it meant he could use magic. He recalled that the game's protagonist, Atlas, was able to rise to prominence in the Magic Academy's story precisely because he possessed this rare aptitude for all attributes. The realization sent a jolt of excitement through him. He had the same specs as the main character. Forcing himself to stay calm, he decided to put it to the test immediately and see if he could actually use magic. Taking a steadying breath, he held out his hands and focused, attempting to cast a novice-level wind attribute spell. Whirlwind, he intoned, and a small mote of light began to coalesce between his palms. The resulting blast was anything but novice. A violent gale erupted from his hands, far more powerful than he ever anticipated. Papers and books were sent flying as the gale tore through the room. Standing amidst the sudden chaos, a wide, gleeful grin spread across his face. He laughed aloud, realizing this was real magic. Amidst the self-made chaos, he stared down at his hands, where a faint magical energy still lingered. He had done it. He could use magic. He felt it then, a warm current flowing through his body. A realization dawned. This had to be mana. It was a miracle, a power from a realm unknown to the science of his past life. Gazing out at the sprawling city, a veritable paradise, he understood that he had been given a chance to start over. He could still enjoy the world of lovely sorcerer, the game he once knew. The sheer happiness of it all overwhelmed him. He clenched his fists, thinking of all he couldn't accomplish before and how he could now savor every moment. With tears of joy, he shouted his thanks to the god of games, privately thrilled that he could finally say such an over-the-top line. His celebration marked the true beginning of his new life. He threw his arms up, declaring that otherworld reincarnations were the best. But his joyous shouts were cut short. The maid, Fran, appeared, demanding to know what was the matter before delivering a swift punishment. He was temporarily banned from using magic. The declaration left him utterly stunned. Before a grand ducal estate, Hermes von Lunicilia stands inside, marveling at his new reality. This is the world of romantic RPG, lovely sorcerer, a world with the magic he's always longed for. His contemplation is cut short by his personal maid, Fran, who sternly reprimands him for the dangerous act of using magic indoors. As she speaks, Hermes is struck by a sudden realization about her identity. His memories confirm that Fran is his personal maid, whose mother also served the Lunicilia household. As he processes this, Fran's lecture intensifies, her voice sharp with concern as she demands to know if he is listening. Having been scolded for over 10 minutes, a flustered Hermes can only stammer a confirmation. He explains that he impulsively used magic because there was something he needed to check. He reflects on the original Hermes, who was known as a pure and gentle person, a stark contrast to his own current behavior. Clasping his hands together, he offers a sincere apology, promising it won't happen again. Internally, however, he admits his strong desire to investigate magic remains undiminished. His apology seems to work. Fran relents, stating that if he understands, she won't nag him further. Hermes then earnestly tells her to remember that none of them wish to see her get hurt. He decides to show his gratitude for her concern with a dazzling smile. He thanks her for worrying about him, his expression radiating sincerity. As they walk through the manor, Hermes internally notes that his charm stat is maxed out, which might explain his smile's effectiveness. Fran guides him toward the dining room, informing him that his father is waiting and that she will clean his room. Now dressed in a more formal, dark tunic, Hermes muses on the perks of nobility as he proceeds to the first floor. He enters the dining room to find his father and mother seated at the table. He offers his apologies for being late, steeling himself to play the role of their gentle son. His parents greet him warmly. The Duchess notes his tardiness, while the Duke asks if he is all right, mentioning a loud noise from earlier. Hermes reassures them, attributing his state to a hazy memory. The Duke's expression remains worried, remarking that it has been a week since the accident. The Duke then delivers startling news. In 1 month, Hermes will begin attending the Royal First Magic Academy. He cautions his son not to push himself too hard. The revelation that he is being sent to the main setting of the game leaves Hermes utterly stunned. He considered the implications of attending the academy, realizing with a start that he would be there at the same time as the heroines from the original game. Sitting at the breakfast table with his parents, a new resolve hardened within him. He didn't know how he ended up as Hermes, but since he had been reincarnated, he was determined to truly live this life. His father watched him, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. His mother explained that although she usually works far away, she had been staying at the house since his accident. She had wanted to remain with him until the entrance ceremony was over, but she admitted that she would have to leave soon. Leaning in close, she insisted that it would be too hard for her to be away from him. She declared that he needed her and must stay by her side, demanding his agreement with an intense gaze. His father cut in, reminding the Duchess that he had assigned her to manage the territory due to a task from His Majesty. Internally, Hermes processed his family's dynamics. His mother's overbearing affection, his absent older sister Lucina, and his problematic younger sister Eris. He cleared his throat and told his mother he didn't mind, apologizing that she couldn't spend much time with him. The Duke sipped his tea, remarking that parenting is difficult, as even a well-behaved child is a challenge. As he ate, Hermes mused that if he was to become the next Duke, he shouldn't indulge in such things unnecessarily. He found his father's sharpness for his age to be rather troublesome. His father then stood, announcing he was heading to the courtyard for his daily morning practice swings. This was their routine. Hermes recalled that the Lunicilia ducal house had a long history of producing geniuses generation after generation. As his father departed, Hermes' eyes narrowed in thought. His father was a master swordsman, as was his elder sister. His younger sister was skilled with magic. As for his own talents, he possessed them all. This was why Hermes had been renowned as the greatest prodigy of the Lunicilia ducal house since its founding. He held a natural talent for swordsmanship and could command all attributes of magic. No matter what he tried, he was a monster who had risen to be among the top practitioners. Leaning forward, his hands pressed flat against the table, his expression was one of chilling, absolute confidence. He reflected on his new reality. In the original story, the real Hermes' humble nature kept his fame from spreading, and he was not a main character. But now, possessing immense talent, he wondered just how far he could go. The thought of aiming to become the strongest was an interesting prospect. With this newfound resolve, he dashed from the room. It would be a shame to possess the best body and the greatest knowledge only to lead a mundane life. He arrived at the training grounds to find his father, who noted that Hermes was earlier than he'd expected. Looking down at his sleepwear, Hermes realized he had forgotten to change. His father reminded him of how he'd previously wrecked the house by swinging his sword around, then instructed him to begin with practice swings and not to stop until told. Taking up a practice sword, he was struck by a realization. Even though it was his first time holding one in this life, his body instinctively knew the proper form. His father watched, affirming that his posture was correct. As he swung the blade, he felt no shift in his balance. His father clapped, impressed. He praised Hermes, stating that he had already mastered the basics. His father encouraged him to have more confidence in himself. Hermes, however, felt he still had a long way to go compared to the Duke. He privately concluded that his past life's experiences must be feeding back into his current abilities, making it all possible. His movements were so fluid they created afterimages. He realized that unlike the fixed combat patterns of the game, he could move freely. This sparked a new thought. Could the same be true for magic? He considered the whirlwind spell he'd used that morning. In the game, no amount of training changed its basic function. It just created a wind to blow a target away, with higher intelligence only increasing the damage. But now, in a real world, perhaps he could do more. Now that it was real, could he control the wind to support his movements? He recalled that using magic hadn't seemed to immobilize him. Eagerly, he declared his desire to try it. His father, sensing his excitement, simply asked if he was ready. Eager to begin, Hermes assures his father, Duke Lunicilia, that he is fine and ready to start training at any moment. He internally acknowledges the vast number of things he wants to accomplish, fearing he might lose focus. The Duke, holding him back by the shoulder, cautions him to be careful and avoid injury. Despite the warning, Hermes charges forward, but he quickly realizes that taking his father's blow head-on will only leave his hands numb. The impact sends him stumbling backward with a cry of pain. His face, however, is alight with fierce determination. With a confident smirk, he braces himself and mentally challenges his father to bring on the hard training. He lunges again, his mind racing with the intent to copy some of his father's techniques before he has to enroll in school. Their wooden swords clash with resounding force. After the spar, Hermes collapses to the ground, panting for breath. He notes with some satisfaction that his body seems to remember how to handle a sword, even after all this time. He laments, however, that he couldn't land a single blow, acknowledging the vast skill gap between them. His father looks down at him, calls him a novice, and announces he is leaving for work, while Fran watches from the manor steps. As he sits up, Fran approaches, offering a towel. Hermes thanks her and then makes a request, a change of clothes and a spell book. She is surprised by the request for spell book. He explains his intention to practice magic after his swordsmanship training, then playfully asks if she would prefer he practice inside his room, which would only get messy again for her to clean. Her cheeks flush in response. Agreeing to his request, Fran declares she will prepare the items right away and hurries back inside. Hermes lies back on the grass, content, thinking it's a perfect day to practice both swordsmanship and magic. A short while later, Fran returns with the book. Hermes thanks her and says she can return to her work, mentioning he'll take his lunch outside. As she hesitates, he senses an ominous feeling and decides it's best not to stray too far from the manor. He held the grimoire, a confident smile on his face as Fran expressed her concern. She cautioned him that a charming smile wouldn't be enough to make girls do his bidding. He called her a worrywart, appreciating the sentiment but gently urging her to focus on her own work. She insisted he call for her if anything happened, remarking on his forceful demeanor. He, however, was already lost in his own world, settling onto the grass. With the courtyard to himself, he thought it was time to begin his magic practice and finally drop the public persona he had been maintaining. Opening the tome, he was immediately captivated. He smirked, realizing with satisfaction that unlike in his previous life playing a game, he could now actually read and understand the contents of these magical grimoires. The book first defined the very nature of magic. It is the act of consuming and controlling the mana that circulates within one's body to produce various phenomena in the world. A diagram illustrated the core elemental affinities: holy, dark, fire, water, air, and earth. It continued, explaining that magic is divided into two fundamental branches. The first is incantation, where a spell is forcibly activated by consuming mana through a chanted verse. The second is mana manipulation, where a spell is materialized simply by controlling one's mana and through visualization. A sudden realization struck Hermes. The book stated that while incantations are easier, their power cannot be adjusted. He instantly connected this to a spell he had witnessed that morning, understanding now that it must have been a forced activation. Of course, such a simple method would have a drawback. The text provided clear examples for incantations. A novice spell would have a fixed cost of 10 mana for a fixed damage output, while an intermediate spell would cost 30 mana for a proportionally higher, but still fixed, damage output. The consumption and effect are predetermined. In stark contrast, mana manipulation offered true control. By adjusting the amount of mana consumed, a user could finely tune the spell's damage. This branch of magic had no rigid classifications like novice or intermediate, offering limitless scalability. As he lay in the grass, absorbing this new information, he learned that mana manipulation could also expand an attack's range and enhance its effects. A firm resolve settled over him. He had to master mana manipulation, no matter the cost. Putting the book aside, he decided to act. He stood and began circulating his mana, imagining it gathering in his hand like blood. To his astonishment, it worked perfectly, his hand drawing in mana like a sponge absorbing water. From a nearby window, an onlooker watched, utterly stunned by his incredible, innate talent. He found the initial success with imagining water to be a good start. He then began to experiment, increasing the mana to make a plume of water surge from his palm before decreasing it, causing the liquid to shrink back into a small puddle. He reveled in the experience, a wide grin spreading across his face as he realized how fun it was. He likened it to a water performance, concluding that the flexibility of controlling a spell's power made magic far more enjoyable to him than swordsmanship. His enthusiastic practice continued until dusk, only ending when Fran arrived to check on him. She called out, exclaiming that it was getting dark, and her intervention forced him to finally stop for the day. With about a month remaining before his enrollment at the Royal First Magic Academy, he dedicated himself to a rigorous training schedule. His mornings were spent under his father's swordsmanship instruction, while his afternoons were devoted to magic. Thanks to this focused effort, he managed to master the other 5 magic attributes, aside from dark, in just 2 weeks. Through this training, he finally gained what he considered a bare minimum of combat ability. His father even noted that his progress with the sword was remarkably fast. In magic, he observed that while his mana consumption was low, its activation was still limited to the palm of his hand. A few days later, as he rested, a thought struck him. The Academy's entrance ceremony was only a week away. He understood that this event would mark the true beginning of the game's main plot. The future he knew was coming. Considering the likelihood of being embroiled in incidents once the story begins, and knowing his freedom would be curtailed at the Academy, he concluded this was his only opportunity. He made a firm decision. He would go to a dungeon to level up, sneaking out of the house, and keeping his plan a secret from his father. Dressed for his excursion, Hermes inspects a sword borrowed from his father's knights, deeming it suitable. With a thought, he places the weapon into his inventory, a personal storage space he recently discovered. This reminds him of 2 weeks prior, when he first realized he could use such an ability after muttering a wish for it. Back then, he was astonished to find that everything in his room could fit inside it without issue. Continuing his recollection, Hermes remembers his experiments with the inventory. He discovered that time seems to be suspended within it, a feature he was certain would prove useful. To test this, he had stored a cup of tea for several days and, upon retrieving it, found it was still perfectly hot. His experiment also revealed the inventory's limitations. When he tried to channel magic into it, the energy simply passed through, showing it couldn't store magical power. As he pondered this, Fran entered, asking with concern if his head was bothering him again. He noted her harsh tone, while also confirming to himself that no one else could perceive or interact with his inventory. Back in the present, Hermes observes that the pantry is running low again, a strange occurrence given he'd stored a month's worth of food. Deciding it's time, he announces his plan to venture into an intermediate dungeon near the capital called the Halls of Lament. Seeing that the servants are no longer on the grounds, he leaps from a window, eager to begin. A short walk from the capital's western gate, he arrives at the dungeon's entrance. It's a simple cave, just as it was in the game he remembers. He muses that while most dungeon entrances are caves, their interiors each possess a unique form and shape. He steps through the entrance, and the mundane cave exterior gives way to a startling sight. The interior is a gigantic, traditional Japanese-style mansion looming in the darkness. The sight unnerves him. He admits to himself that he is not good with horror, and seeing the eerie mansion in person is far more terrifying than it ever was in a game. He trembles, but forces himself to push forward. He steels his resolve, reminding himself that this is another world's dungeon, and that he is equipped with both a sword and magic. Believing he can handle anything, he pushes open the mansion doors and steps into a corridor lit by floating lanterns, where a small, harmless-looking spirit drifts past. He reassures himself with the knowledge from his past life. He knows this dungeon's layout, even though it has been expanded and made more complex by this world's magic. Crucially, He knows where the monsters are, allowing him to avoid pointless battles and navigate without getting lost. Peeking around a corner, his knowledge is confirmed. He spots his targets, the skeletons. Knowing the area he needs to reach is just ahead, he prepares to advance with stealth. He assessed his opponents. Among the undead, skeletons were relatively weak, but at level 1, a direct confrontation was too risky. He observed their patrol patterns, noticing how their routes were designed not to overlap. There were paths to remain unseen, but he saw an opportunity, a strategy that could only work here if he timed it perfectly. Stepping into the open, he taunted a single skeleton, ensuring it would give chase. With the creature's attention fixed solely on him, he turned and brandished a ball of light, shouting for it to take the bait. He led the rattling pursuers up a narrow staircase, a perfect choke point. He recalled that for undead monsters, holy and fire attributes were most effective, with holy being particularly potent against skeletons. The trap was set. The creatures were now effectively stun-locked, unable to advance properly. As the skeletons struggled on the stairs, he began to shape his magic. He knew skeletons resisted striking attacks, but were vulnerable to piercing. To maximize his damage, he decided to modify the spell, adding rotation to the holy energy to decrease its area but increase its power, imagining it as a piercing bullet. With a determined cry to test his theory, he thrust his hand forward, unleashing the condensed bolt of holy light. The spell struck true, but the skeleton endured. He recalled data from his past life. At his starting stats, it should take 5 shots of standard holy magic to defeat one. He realized his current magic proficiency was simply too low, resulting in insufficient power. A smirk crossed his face. This was an opportunity. Considering his natural mana recovery, he declared to the trapped skeletons that they would be his training partners for a while, aiding his experimentation and leveling. Surprisingly, one of the skeletons seemed to affirm his declaration. With their unwitting consent secured, he began his assault, darting around the staircase and repeatedly firing his holy bullets. A wild, triumphant laugh echoed through the hall as he reveled in the efficiency of his training method, relentlessly bombarding his trapped foes. After the last skeleton crumbled, he checked his status. He had reached level 6, with all his base stats now at 25. His holy magic proficiency had risen to novice 15, and his swordsman skill to novice 33. He smiled, pleased that his level had gone up a good bit. He walks away from the dungeon, reflecting on the dangers of this world. With his own sister being a hardcore fighter, he muses that his father can hardly complain about him seeking to become stronger. A glance at his pocket watch makes him realize he must head home soon to avoid causing an uproar. He lets out a laugh, amused at how quickly he'd grown accustomed to the grim, horror-like ambience of his training grounds. As he travels, he considers the need for a good excuse to continue slipping out of the house. For the next few days, he maintains his routine, continuing his dungeon trips and researching magic at home. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrives. Now dressed in a formal uniform, he clutches a copy of the game, Lovely Sorcerer. He resolves to stay away from the main character to avoid getting entangled in the plot, but he cannot contain his excitement. He is eager to meet his favorite character, Manurva, declaring that today, the story finally begins. His thoughts drift to the game's main heroine, Manurva. He recalls that she presents as a typical tsundere, but if one follows her personal route and raises her affection, she reveals an unbelievably sweet and loving side, a character gap he finds irresistible. Pushing open a set of grand doors, he accepts his fate. He is well aware that as a mere side character, he isn't destined to be with any of the heroines. Still, he is happy for the chance to see the girls he once admired and is glad he can support their romantic paths. With a determined expression, he readies himself to play the role of Hermes once more. He scratches his cheek, slightly amending his internal monologue. He is just a mob character and has no intention of making a move on the heroines, but he admits it would be nice to at least chat with Manurva. With that thought, the stage is set, showing him alongside the 3 heroines as their shared story is about to begin. In April, as spring arrives, the entrance ceremony for the Royal First Magic Academy is set to begin. This marks the start of the main story of the romantic action RPG, Lovely Sorcerer. Inside a carriage, Hermes von Lunacelia, a reincarnated 15-year-old aware he is but a mob character, questions if walking would be faster. The coachman insists that his safety comes first. Hermes smiles, finding it fated to be enrolled alongside the game's main characters and happy just to be involved in the story he knows as a fan. He reflects on his journey. Until middle school, Hermes had kept his abilities hidden to lead a quiet life. Now, however, with his family expecting him to stand out, he has decided to master both swordsmanship and magic to become unparalleled. A peaceful life is no longer possible. Looking out the window alongside a girl with a prominent dark bow in her hair, Manurva, she points out that the school building is now visible. Hermes internally reaffirms his sole purpose, to enjoy this world to its fullest. He couldn't care less about anything else. The carriage proceeds down a wide, bustling street. Internally, Hermes chuckles to himself, recognizing this as the place of his dreams. His eyes widen in awe as he looks up, taking in the sight before him. The Royal First Magic Academy stands before him, a vast and magnificent structure that commands the landscape. Having arrived, Hermes bids farewell to his maid, Fran, informing her that he'll be living in the dorms for the next 3 years. A flustered Fran tells him not to jest, admitting she'd be too worried to sleep if he were to get injured. He reassures her, asking her to take care of herself, and turns to head for the ceremony. Fran watches him depart, surprised at how quickly he left. He walks toward the academy grounds, his heart racing with excitement. His first priority is to find out which class he's been assigned to. As he walks, he passes 2 other girls, one identifiable by her thigh-high stockings and the other by her distinctive drill-like curls. He immediately runs into a problem. A massive crowd of students is packed tightly around the class lists. Amid the shouting and jostling, he realizes he can't see a thing. Suddenly, a presence brushes past him, and he gasps. His eyes widen in surprise, and reflected in his gaze is the clear image of a girl with large, spiraling drill-like curls. He stammers as another girl addresses him by name. It is Lady Manurva, and his mind races. His beloved main heroine has appeared right before him. She is Manurva von Sunlight, the main heroine of the game, lovely sorcerer, and, like Hermes, a member of a ducal house. Overwhelmed, Hermes manages a stuttered "good morning," calling their meeting a coincidence. Manurva questions this, pointing out that it's only natural for 2 new students to encounter each other at the academy. He internally acknowledges the truth in her words, though his surprise stems from his knowledge of the game. The Sunlight ducal house, her family, serves the royals as judicial officers. Manurva then reveals she knows something he doesn't. He is in Class 1, just like her. The revelation hits him with the force of a physical blow. He recoils in disbelief, wondering how it could be possible. His mind flashes to a key detail from the game. All the main characters were in the same class. He realizes that being in Manurva's class means he will inevitably be classmates with all the other heroines and the protagonist as well. The thought that he is no longer the only one with his unique status sends him into a panic. Noticing his turmoil, Manurva asks if he is glad. Before he can answer, she explains that he has caught her eye as the first person to ever possess an aptitude for all magic attributes, a fact intriguing enough to capture anyone's curiosity. She admits she is also glad they are classmates. Her interest is further piqued because she heard he is a commoner, and there is another scholarship student this year with the same aptitudes as her, the game's main character, Atlas. She finds them both interesting. Hermes is bewildered by her forwardness, a stark contrast to her game persona. Manurva's eyes gleam with determination as she declares she cannot hold back her curiosity regarding someone from the Lunacelia house with such prodigious abilities. In her eagerness, she steps too close, causing Hermes to stumble back. She loses her balance, but he catches her with a startled cry. As he apologizes profusely, she simply looks up and asks if he was injured. He held the girl he had just caught, struck by her unexpected cuteness. A question surfaced in his mind. Did the game he remembered ever feature a character like this? She stammered that she was fine, her face flushed with embarrassment. He observed that, to him, she did not seem fine at all. He pressed the matter, asking if she was truly all right and offering his help. He explained that since he could use holy magic, treating a light wound would be simple. As he looked closer, a strange sense of familiarity washed over him. Before he could place her, Manurva's voice cut in, telling Hermes to stop because he seemed to be troubling the girl. She then introduced her as Artemis von Asta, daughter of the famed adventurer household, the Asta ducal house. The name finally clicked for Hermes. She continued, questioning how he could have possibly forgotten someone like Artemis. The connection dawned on him. Their fathers had been schoolmates, making them acquaintances. At the same time, he realized with certainty that her character had never appeared in the game. As he processed this, Artemis stammered that they were too close and there was no need to hold her back. He quickly apologized to Lady Artemis, explaining he only meant to ensure she wasn't injured. But she erupted in a flustered shout, insisting she was the one who had rudely bumped into him. Her intense, embarrassed reaction was startling. In a flash, Artemis turned and fled down the hall with incredible speed. Hermes watched her go, remarking on her quickness and feeling relieved she was unhurt, though admitting his own carelessness. Manurva silently observed the entire exchange. With the other girl gone, Manurva closed the distance, startling Hermes. She leaned in close, stating that since they had a rare opportunity, she had something to say. He stammered, flustered by her proximity. Manurva coyly asked if there wasn't still a beautiful, fragile maiden right there. At that moment, Eurysthea approached, asking who she meant and identifying Manurva as the versatile top student skilled in both swords and magic. A grateful Hermes began to thank Eurysthea, but was cut off. He stammered, tried to explain that he was simply heading to their class. Eurysthea, however, cut him off with a theatrical flourish, questioning where he thought he was running off to with such a beautiful maiden like Manurva. She pressed further, asking if he truly intended to leave behind another girl from his very own class. Overwhelmed, Hermes could only agree to accompany Lady Manurva. Her point made, Eurysthea's expression shifted to one of pure, feigned delight. She sweetly asked if she could trouble him for some companionable conversation on the way. Without waiting for a real answer, she declared that since he was so insistent, she would graciously tag along. All Hermes could do was accept his fate, muttering that it would be his pleasure. Before the grand Lunicilia ducal estate, Hermes reflects on his new reality. This is the world of the game, lovely sorcerer, a place of magic and spells he had always longed for, even if its civilization is behind that of Earth. His contemplation is cut short by his personal maid, Fran, who is furiously scolding him for the dangerous act of using magic indoors. She continues her tirade, demanding to know if Hermes-sama is even listening. He meekly affirms that he is, while internally noting that she has been lecturing him for over 10 minutes. He recalls from the original Hermes' memories that Fran is his personal maid, and her mother is also a devoted maid to the Lunicilia household. He bows his head slightly, acknowledging that he had simply wanted to check something and impulsively used magic. He muses on the personality of the previous Hermes, a man of character, pure and gentle, blessed with loyal servants and friends, though perhaps with a flair for the dramatic. Clasping his hands in a gesture of apology, he promises Fran that it won't happen again, expressing his sincere regret. Internally, however, he admits to himself that his true desire is simply to investigate magic. His apology seems to work. Fran's expression softens, and she tells him that if he understands, she won't nag him about it anymore. She simply asks him to remember that none of them wish to see him get hurt. Moved by her concern, Hermes decides to show his utmost gratitude. He turns a dazzling, radiant smile upon Fran, thanking her for worrying about him. As Fran leads him away, he internally connects his new handsome appearance to his game stats, realizing his charm is maxed out at 100, a stark contrast to the game protagonist's starting value of 10. Fran guides him toward the dining room on the first floor, announcing that the master is awaiting his arrival. He enters the dining room to find his parents, the Duke and Duchess, already seated. Steeling himself, he resolves to play the part of their real, gentle son, Hermes, and apologizes for making them wait. His mother greets him, noting his tardiness, while his father asks if he is all right, mentioning a loud noise from earlier. Hermes reassures them, explaining that his memory is just a bit hazy. The Duke's expression grows worried as he remarks that it has been a week since the accident. His father then delivers startling news. He tells Hermes not to push himself too hard, because in 1 month's time, he will be attending the Royal First Magic Academy. Hermes is stunned, realizing this is the very school that serves as the main setting for Lovely Sorcerer. He processed the news, realizing he would be attending the academy at the same time as the heroines from the game he knew so well. As he sat at the dining table across from his father, he internally solidified his resolve. Since he had been reincarnated, he was determined to truly live this new life, no matter how he ended up as Hermes. His thoughts drifted to the time after his accident. His mother, who usually worked far away, had been staying at the house. She had wanted to remain with him until the entrance ceremony was over, but acknowledged that she would have to leave soon. His mother, however, found the thought of leaving difficult. She leaned in close, insisting that he needed her by his side and pleading for his agreement, much to his discomfort. The entire family dynamic was intense. His father was often occupied with managing the territory, a task assigned by the king. Internally, Hermes reflected on his memories, noting his sly sister Lucina and another, Eris, whom he considered a problem child. Overwhelmed, he apologized to his father for his mother's clinginess, but the Duke simply waved it off. His father sipped his tea, remarking that parenting is a difficult thing. A well-behaved child is hard enough for a parent, let alone one who acts unreasonably. He then looked at Hermes, noting that he was surprisingly sharp for his age, a fact he found somewhat troublesome. Hermes laughed in response, agreeing that as the future Duke, he shouldn't indulge unnecessarily. His father stood, announcing he was off to the courtyard for his daily morning sword practice. Hermes knew this was part of a long family tradition, as the Lunicilia ducal house had produced geniuses since its very first generation. He internally cataloged his family's prowess. His father, a master swordsman, his elder sister, skilled with a blade, his younger sister, skilled with magic. As for his own talents, he possessed them all. This was why Hermes had been renowned as the greatest prodigy of the Lunicilia ducal house since its founding. He had a natural talent for swordsmanship and could use all attributes of magic. Leaning forward over the table with a dark intensity, he acknowledged the truth. No matter what he had tried, he had always been a monster who naturally rose to be among the top practitioners. He reflected on his new reality. In the game, he was not one of the main characters, but now, things were different. Because of the original Hermes' humble nature, his true potential had never been widely known. Now possessing a gifted body and the knowledge of his past life, he wondered how far his talents could go, resolving that it would be interesting to aim to become the strongest. With this newfound determination, he felt it would be a shame to lead a mundane life. He had the best body and the greatest knowledge. Fueled by this thought, he dashed through the manor, ready to begin his training at once. He arrived at the training grounds to find his father already there. The Duke noted that Hermes was earlier than he'd thought. Flustered, Hermes admitted he'd eaten a light meal specifically for training and had forgotten to change out of his sleepwear. His father, unfazed, instructed him to begin with practice swings and to continue until told to stop. Hermes readily agreed. As he began swinging the practice sword, he was struck by a realization. Even though this was his first time performing the motion, his body instinctively knew the proper form. His father watched, confirming his son's flawless technique. He continued the swings, amazed that his balance remained perfectly steady. The Duke looked on with approval, remarking that, as expected of Hermes, he had already mastered the basics. His father theorized that the original Hermes' past experiences were being fed back to him. Hermes acknowledged the amazing feeling, but humbly stated he still had a long way to go compared to the Duke. In response, his father encouraged him, telling him he should have more confidence in himself. As he swung the blade, a new thought emerged. Unlike the fixed attack patterns in the game, he could move his body freely. This led him to a critical question. Could the same be true for magic? He recalled his experience with the whirlwind spell. In the game, no matter how much one trained or increased their intelligence stat, it only created a wind that blew the target away, merely increasing the damage. There was no true control. But now that it was real, he wondered if he could control the wind to support his own movements. He remembered there was no immobilization period when he used magic before. As his father asked if he was ready, Hermes' mind raced with the possibilities. He wanted to try it immediately. As students mill about, Hermes von Lunicilia overhears a rumor among the maids about some delicious sweets. He notes to himself that it's time for class, observing that at least one of his companions is cheered up. Still, he internally questions the enjoyment people find in such small talk. A woman at the front of the classroom calls for everyone's attention, introducing herself as their new homeroom teacher, Teresa Bernal. Hermes immediately recognizes her as a minor character from a game, the daughter of a viscount and a prodigy who earned her teaching qualifications at young age. He recalls hearing that she possesses 2 magic affinities, an uncommon trait. She informs the class that while formal lessons will begin tomorrow, she has urgent information to share. Her expression turns serious as she warns them about a recent string of kidnappings in the capital. She advises everyone to be careful if they go out on their days off, revealing that the victims have included the sons and daughters of noble families. The news stuns Hermes. These kidnappings never occurred in the game. Artemis von Asta turns to him, surprised he wasn't aware. He realizes with a jolt that something is wrong. The victims range from nobles to orphans, making the attacks indiscriminate. This deviation is alarming, as he recalls that the darker plot points of the game weren't supposed to begin until the second year. He processes the strange case, wondering if it's an anomaly caused by his reincarnation. While the guards might handle it, he worries in the worst-case scenario, he may need to act on behalf of the protagonist and heroine to keep the main story on its intended track. Despite the worrying news, the entrance ceremony concludes without incident. As students disperse, Hermes resolves to gather more information from Mrs. Teresa later. A sense of unease settles over him. He can't shake the feeling that he is about to be dragged into this affair. Making good on his decision, he approaches his new teacher. "Mrs. Teresa," he calls out, getting her attention. He asks directly about the kidnapping case, wanting to know if there are any details about the culprit's descriptions. She turns to him and agrees to share what she knows. She relays the information from the guards. They mention that the group includes a swordsman who is rather skilled, accompanied by thugs. However, the entire group seems unusually well organized and put together. Later, while discussing the matter with Manurva, she expresses her fear. She notes that while they are safe in the dorms, it would be dreadful if things worsen in the capital, wishing that the master swordsman, Grail von Winter, were there. The name doesn't immediately ring a bell for Hermes, who struggles to recall such people from his game knowledge. Then, the memory surfaces. Grail is the commander of the kingdom's Knight Order and holds the title of Master Swordsman, the strongest in the land. He is also the father of one of the game's heroines, Freya von Winter. Hermes recalls that in Freya's story route, Grail was a dependable ally, possessing skill so great he could single-handedly defeat a level 60 monster. He processes this information as Artemis von Asta warns him to be careful on his days off and not to go out at night. He thanks her for the information, acknowledging to himself that with the Master Swordsman deep in a dungeon, his return is a long way off. Sometime later, inside the bustling academy library, he finds himself surrounded by fellow students, a sense of excitement building as he exclaims about the discoveries to be made. His search leads him to a particular volume. With a spark of excitement, he realizes he's holding a genuine intermediate spell book, one filled with practical examples of mana manipulation and control. New ideas immediately begin to swirl in his imagination. He desperately wants to continue reading, but his enthusiasm is checked by the academy rule. Spellbooks cannot be checked out from the library. Resigned, he decides he will simply have to return to the library repeatedly until he can manage intermediate spells. He also reminds himself that he must improve his academic standing and practice mana manipulation, as the Common Routes exam is only a month away. The day that classes officially begin arrives. He stretches and yawns in his room, feeling unenthusiastic about the morning's general education courses, knowing that the practical sword and magic training won't happen until the afternoon. As he practices, conjuring a small flame in his palm, his maid Fran greets him with a cheerful "good morning" and asks if he slept well. He is completely absorbed, marveling at the simple joy of using magic freely and the prospect of seeing his classmates' spells. Later, while eating, he asks Fran if she prepared the meal. She explains that it was made by the Academy's chef and that she resides in the servant dorms. He replies, half jokingly, that he would prefer her cooking. The thought crosses his mind that he should be more discreet with his magic practice, as she visits his room quite often. In the classroom, as the start of the lesson approaches, Fran expresses her excitement for the general education courses. Hermes admits he is also looking forward to it, then turns his attention to Minerva von Sunlight, stating he has high hopes for her spells. Minerva, though uncertain of the outcome, promises to do her best. Hermes internally recalls that she possesses a high aptitude for fire magic and is also one of the top 3 sword wielders in their grade. He responds in kind, promising to achieve results that won't disappoint her. Minerva smiles, confessing she has similar expectations and looks forward to witnessing his talents. Just then, a chime echoes through the hall, signaling that class is about to begin. He found the morning classes to be mostly general education, much like what he remembered from middle school. However, there were occasional interesting tidbits about specialized topics like blacksmithing or magic. The 4th period lesson shifted to world history, recounting a great war waged long ago between the human and demon realms. Hermes imagined a valiant hero defeating an evil demon lord to save the world. The teacher explained that the demon world is now a land overrun by monsters, where a demon nation might even exist, and that the number of monsters in the human world is kept in check because of this history. She then paused, asking if there were any questions. In response, Minerva elaborated on the topic. She explained that despite the hero's victory, the demons were not completely eradicated. Their overwhelming numbers meant the best the humans could achieve was to drive them from the human world. Another student added that, frankly, the demons' superior physical strength was only overcome because the humans had the advantage in numbers. This information gave him pause. He mused that this currently peaceful world also possessed a blood-stained cycle of history, making it no different from Earth or any other world in that regard. The discussion then turned to the legendary hero's weapon. Minerva spoke with admiration about the sacred sword, noting its distinctive pale, blue blade and expressing a desire to see it one day. The teacher added that even centuries later, the sword remains lost, its location a complete mystery. Internally, Hermes reeled with excitement. All this new information, magic, a hero, a sacred sword, was popping up, details that were never part of the game he knew. He silently vowed to research the sword if he ever found it. As if sensing his intense focus, Minerva told him there was no need to worry. But Artemis interjected, revealing that the hero had used the sacred sword and a special item to seal the demon lord away. She continued, clarifying that even the hero couldn't truly slay the immensely powerful demon lord. For that reason, the demon lord was merely sealed, a fact the demons themselves are unaware of. The hero, she concluded, took the method to break that seal to his grave. A jolt went through Hermes. This part of the story was unfolding exactly as it did in the game. The weight of this knowledge settled upon him with chilling certainty. He was probably the only person in this entire world who knew the ending, the truth of what was to come. A sharp bell chimed, signaling the end of the period and jolting him from his profound realization. Mrs. Teresa announced that this concluded their morning lessons. She reminded them all that after lunch, they would have practical sword training. The voice of the swordsmanship instructor cuts through the post-lecture murmur. A large, powerfully built man with a rugged beard and a confident grin leans on a thick wooden staff, his bandaged forearms crossed. He issues a clear directive for all students to assemble at the first training grounds, adding a stern warning not to be late. A boisterous, bearded knight addresses a crowd of students on the training grounds. He welcomes the first years, introducing himself as their teacher, Simon Gatiss. He warns them to prepare themselves, as the high school curriculum takes a very practical approach to combat. Standing among the students, Hermes von Lunicilia internally remarks on how loud the instructor is. In response to his rousing speech, the students shout their affirmation in unison. Simon Gatiss declares that they will waste no time. After some practice swings with great swords, they will begin mock battles. He bellows for them to quit swinging and prepare to pair up. Hermes is startled by the sudden command. From a balcony above, Duke Lunicilia watches with crossed arms, noting that someone seems to possess talent. Down on the field, Hermes feels an unnerving sensation, as if he is being watched. As he stands uneasily, a voice calls his name. Minerva von Sunlight approaches, stating that since he's the extra student, he gets to pair up with the teacher. The thought horrifies Hermes, who internally laments that he isn't good at pairing up with others and definitely doesn't want this. Before he can react, Minerva offers an alternative, asking if he would like to cross blades with her. Hermes is stunned, recognizing her as Lady Minerva. His mind floods with panic. An invitation from a main heroine is a classic trigger for a romance arc in the game, a development he is desperate to avoid. He reels internally, wondering why events are unfolding in ways he doesn't recognize. He glances around for the game's protagonist, Atlas, only to see him casually chatting with another classmate. As he worries about the other heroines, Minerva notices his distraction and asks if something is wrong. Stammering that it's nothing, Hermes is caught off guard as Minerva leans in, her face just inches from his. She tells him she looks forward to crossing blades with him. Flustered by her intense proximity, he manages to agree, stating that the honor is his. With the matter settled, the two take their positions on the training floor. As other pairs begin their spars around them, Hermes and Manurva ready their practice swords and declare their duel to begin. The spar begins with explosive force. Manurva lunges, her blade crashing against his with shocking power. Hermes is thrown onto the defensive, his expression one of pure disbelief as he struggles to parry her relentless assault. He stumbles back, realizing with alarm that she is blindly aiming for his neck. He dodges, a chilling thought crossing his mind. For the daughter of a judicial officer, her swordsmanship is utterly savage. He shifts his weight, expertly mirroring Minerva's stance with his practiced greatsword. The sudden change in his form catches her completely off guard as he recognizes an opportunity and decides to mimic her movements. In response, Minerva lunges forward, swinging her blade low toward his legs. He parries the blow, their wooden swords clashing. She glares, refusing to be underestimated, but he calmly assesses her attack as simply a sword technique he has not yet learned. Their exchange intensifies as their blades meet again in a powerful, resounding impact that fills the training hall. The momentum of the duel shifts dramatically. Now it is Minerva who is forced onto the defensive, her expression one of shock as she parries a heavy swing from Hermes. He presses his advantage, and with another sharp crack of wood on wood, Minerva is pushed back. A stunned realization dawns on her. The moves he is using are her own. Internally, Hermes acknowledges his extraordinary, cheat-level ability to learn. He understands that with just a few more exchanges, he can master Minerva's techniques. He analyzes his own performance, noting his thrusts are still too gentle and his balance shifts when aiming for vital spots. But a confident grin spreads across his face as he eagerly anticipates more. Across from him, Minerva trembles, a mixture of disbelief and excitement on her face. She cannot comprehend how he could have stolen her technique after just one clash. A small, manic laugh escapes her as she realizes her initial suspicion was correct. He is a true genius. Her excitement turns to fierce determination. She readies her stance once more, declaring that she will defeat him before he has the chance to copy anything else from her. But her declaration is cut short. Her practice sword clatters to the floor as she sinks to her knees, her arms trembling. She admits defeat, unable to even swing her weapon any longer. Hermes lets out a sigh of relief as the onlooking students murmur in awe at the incredible duel. Wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, he reflects on the fight. He knows that attempting to copy an opponent's techniques mid-battle is a reckless and dangerous gamble for most. He, however, is out of the ordinary. He internally celebrates his victory, realizing the immense potential of Minerva's distance-controlling sword style. The thought of refining this stolen technique to become even stronger fills him with a giddy excitement, and he can't help but laugh to himself. This feeling of discovery is intoxicating. The thrill of absorbing new experiences and forging them into new possibilities is a rush unlike any other. His internal celebration is cut short as he notices Minerva's dejected state. She clenches her fist, frustrated by the thought that even a rematch would end in her defeat. Hermes recognizes her feelings and internally chastises himself for letting his true, calculating nature slip out, acknowledging to her that the difference in their physical abilities was the deciding factor. He resolves to offer some encouragement, believing that this defeat shouldn't hinder her. To him, it simply means she is no longer the only special one. He approaches her, intending to cheer her up. He tells her that she still has plenty of room to grow, reminding her that she hasn't even fully mastered her own sword techniques yet. He declares that the truly strong are those who persevere until the very end and offers to help, suggesting they train and become stronger together. His offer seems to move her. She asks for confirmation that he won't abandon her, and he reassures her that he won't, which is precisely why she must not give up. After a moment of quiet gratitude, she grabs his arm and asks him to look after her from now on, much to his confusion. Their close proximity draws a loud rebuke from the other students, who accuse them of flirting. The commotion is interrupted by their instructor, Mrs. Teresa, who announces that the next lesson will be on magic. The sudden shift in topic leaves Hermes flustered. As the class prepares for the next lesson, a dreadful realization dawns on Hermes. He remembers his intended role as a mere background character. He isn't supposed to be forming friendships with a main heroine like Minerva. The magic lesson begins, pulling his focus back to the present. Mrs. Teresa explains they will start with the basics of mana control, as combat magic is too dangerous for beginners. With a simple gesture, she effortlessly manipulates her mana into a complex, fiery form, impressing both Hermes and Minerva with her masterful control. Following her demonstration, the instructor elaborates that greater mana reserves lead to greater difficulty in control. Hermes internally notes that he has some experience with magic transformations from his own self-training. Mrs. Teresa then gives the class permission to practice freely, and Hermes decides to attempt forming a miniature tornado in his palm. He begins the practical magic exercise, a grin spreading across his face as a small vortex of wind forms in his palm. The power feels incredible, and he marvels at the idea that magic can do anything. He feels the force it contains and becomes eager to see even more of what it's capable of. His initial success only fuels his insatiable curiosity. He He wonders what sort of damage would occur if he were to abruptly stop the flow of magic. It's a risky thought, but he recalls a technique he developed in his previous life's middle school days, coating his hands in a protective layer of mana. With his hands shielded, he decides to test his theory. He lets the defensive mana dissipate, bracing himself for the impact while trying to maintain an inconspicuous posture. The small whirlwind collapses violently in his hand. The backlash stings his palm sharply. He winces, but quickly realizes he can heal such a minor injury with holy magic. A faint glow envelopes his hands, and the discomfort fades, confirming to himself that the result wasn't too bad. The successful experiment emboldens him. A rush of new ideas floods his mind, and he decides to move beyond simple hand tricks. With a determined look, he resolves to try using his entire body, specifically wondering if he could use air magic to launch himself into the sky. Without a moment's hesitation, he puts the thought into action. A powerful gust of wind erupts from beneath his feet, propelling him high into the air. But as he soars upwards, a sudden panic sets in. He hadn't considered the landing. His uncontrolled flight ends abruptly as he plummets into a large pool of water with a loud splash. His experiment coming to a wet and ungraceful conclusion. He surfaces, sputtering, to the sight of his instructor, Mrs. Teresa, who is panting nearby. She expresses her amazement, telling him that with such fine magic control, he can achieve incredible feats. Soaked but relieved, Hermes thanks her. Her praise quickly turns into a stern lecture. Gripping his shoulders, Mrs. Teresa acknowledges his extraordinary talent and curiosity, but firmly reminds him that magic is inherently dangerous. Hermes internally concedes that her anger is justified. Following the eventful class, his first Sunday at the academy arrives. Now in a formal uniform, he feels a sense of freedom, excited for his first day off. He plans to go level up at a place called the Halls of Lament, glad that he doesn't have to hide his abilities without his parents watching. Just as he is about to depart, Fran appears, asking where he is headed. Hermes emphatically declares his desire to go to the dungeon, but his maid, Fran, stops him with her hands on her hips, demanding to know his destination. Dejected, Hermes complains that with the current situation, he can't even go outside. He sighs, lamenting that it's his day off and he just wanted a little time to himself. She presses him, questioning if he understands how unsafe the royal capital has become and warning that he could be kidnapped. Hermes argues that he should at least be allowed to go to town on his day off, confidently stating he would just beat down any attackers. Unimpressed, Fran tells him that's not the issue. He then produces a document, announcing he has permission and telling her not to worry, but she immediately shuts him down. Despite his supposed permission, Hermes turns to leave, grumbling that he can't even relax on his day off. Watching him go, Fran makes a firm decision. She declares that she will go wherever he goes. Moved by her dedication, Hermes grabs her hands, thanking her for her concern and saying he's touched. Flustered by the sudden closeness, Fran can only stammer his name. Sometime later, having successfully slipped away, Hermes walks cheerfully through the streets. It's been a week since he last leveled up in the Corridor of Lament, and he's excited for more dungeon time, smugly thinking that Fran won't be able to catch up to him. His path leads him to a foreboding, traditional-style building shrouded in the darkness of night. A menacing aura seems to pulse from it, but he simply chuckles, thinking to himself that he has grown accustomed to creepy things. He pushes open the heavy doors, trying to convince himself that it isn't scary at all. Just inside the darkened entrance, a figure stands waiting. The doors swing wide to reveal Artemis von Asta, who stammers his name in shock. Hermes is just as surprised to see her there, questioning her presence. Artemis fires back the same question, to which Hermes retorts that it was his question first. Inside the gloomy corridor, Hermes recovers slightly and apologizes. He rephrases his question, asking if she came to the dungeon to get stronger. He presses on, asking if she's there to train. Visibly flustered, Artemis waves her hands dismissively and blushes, quickly denying it and insisting that is not her purpose for being there. She stammers, clarifying that she is not here to train, but to find her father, the renowned adventurer. Hermes can only offer a quiet sound of understanding. He recalls the casual way people speak of Count Astor's frequent disappearances, but this situation feels different. Rumors claim the adventurer has been missing for a month, and now his own daughter has ventured into a dangerous dungeon in search of him. He acknowledges her predicament, but questions if she is used to dungeon exploration, stressing the danger of being alone. He reveals that his own mother strictly forbade him from searching for his father, making him unable to simply ignore a girl entering a dungeon by herself. Firmly, he tells her she should head back immediately. In response, she clutches a piece of paper to her chest, refusing his command. She explains that the document contains her father's notes, which lead her to believe he might be in this very place. Looking at the notes, Hermes recognizes several key terms from lore materials he has studied: Hero's Necklace, Lament Obsidian, Corridor of Lament, Moonlight Blade, and Legend of the Hero. He connects these items to a recent lecture on the Legend of the Hero, remembering that the Hero's Necklace, Lament Obsidian, and Moonlight Blade were all part of that story. A crucial detail strikes him. While these items are supposedly powerful against monsters, they never actually appeared in the game he knew. Artemis explains that since the Corridor of Lament was the only name on the list she could immediately confirm, she came here hoping to find her father. Handing the notes back to her, he concedes. He acknowledges her determination, stating that while the dungeon is dangerous and any harm to her would devastate her family, he will respect her decision not to give up. She accepts the paper, her expression a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Seeing that her mind is made up, he then makes an offer. If she doesn't mind, he will help her search for her father and protect her along the way. His sudden proposal leaves Artemis momentarily speechless, but he beams with confidence. She questions his motives, pointing out that they are not particularly close. He explains his reasons plainly. He genuinely wants to help her, and now he also wants to meet Count Astor. Furthermore, he wishes to decipher the meaning of the notes, and upon learning that his own father was an academy classmate of the Count, he feels a duty to help ease his father's potential worries. With unwavering conviction shining in his eyes, he makes a solemn vow to protect her with his life, causing her to blush in surprise. He reflects that this outcome is to be expected after his dramatic declaration. Artemis, still flustered by his vow, averts her gaze and meekly agrees to be in his care as they step into the dungeon. Almost immediately, monsters swarm them from the shadows. Hermes leaps into the fray, sword drawn, realizing that his training at the academy is paying off as he prepares to level up with Artemis now accompanying him. He moves with a fluid confidence, his body already adapted to its new form and movements. With a powerful swing of his blade, he cuts down another creature in his path. With the immediate threat neutralized, he stands confidently, sword at the ready. A summary of his abilities reveals his status. Hermes von Lunacelia, age 15, level 12, with balanced stats and a high charm rating. As they continue down the dungeon corridor, Artemis looks at him with wide-eyed amazement, remarking on how easily he dispatched the monster. He begins to explain that the monsters are weak for his current level, but stops short when he sees her confused expression. He questions if she even knows what a level is, realizing they weren't on the same page and that her ignorance could be a dangerous trap. Seeing her complete lack of understanding, he decides he should explain the concept. He apologizes for the assumption, but she assures him it's fine as other monsters watch from a distance. He clarifies that level is a measure of strength, and the enemies here are weaker than him, so he can beat them easily. He then asks if she's not very good at fighting, which flusters her. He quickly adds that just being able to face monsters at all is impressive. Artemis confesses that while she inherited her adventurer father's blood, she's not physically adept and just gets scared. She calls it ridiculous, revealing her father is Count Astor. Hermes immediately tells her not to speak of herself that way, admitting he's been treating this like a game and it's unfair to expect someone not to fear creatures trying to kill them. He tells her that talent and family status don't matter. Since no two people are alike, she should walk her own path because it is her own life. As they continue forward, he silently wonders if that is what parents truly wish for their children's future. He continues leading Artemis down the dungeon stairs, reassuring her that if anyone gives her trouble, he will personally take care of them. She follows closely behind, her posture still hesitant. They soon arrive at a landing before a large set of doors. As he announces their arrival, Artemis, her face flushed, offers him a sincere thank you. His gaze fixes on the doors as he casually identifies the area as a monster room. Artemis, startled, asks what that is. He explains it's a room where a large number of monsters suddenly appear, causing her to gasp in shock. She stammers, questioning if such a place isn't incredibly dangerous. He turns to her and confirms that it is, but confidently adds that it's fine, as he came fully prepared. He then announces his intention to open the door immediately. Artemis cries out, shocked by his abruptness, but he simply affirms his decision. He pushes the heavy doors inward, but the room beyond is completely empty. He observes that there's nothing inside, while Artemis peers from behind him, wondering aloud where the monsters could be. After a moment's pause, he deems the area clear and takes a decisive step over the threshold, announcing that he is going in. The instant he enters, the room erupts. A horde of skeletons, orcs, and other foul creatures materializes from thin air. As Artemis screams in absolute terror, a wide, exhilarated grin spreads across Hermes' face. Surrounded by skeletal monsters, Hermes has a sudden realization. If the creatures are undead, fire should be their weakness. Beside him, Artemis stares in wide-eyed horror at the encroaching horde. Acting on this thought, he thrusts his palm forward, shouting there, as a jet of flame erupts towards the nearest enemy. The fire engulfs the creature, and a grin spreads across Hermes' face. It's working. He knows that these particular monsters, ninja zombies, will gain a continuous burn status from the flames due to their rapid movements. He decides to press his advantage, adding wind magic to the blaze. As the flames touch other monsters, the burning effect spreads, creating a chain reaction of destruction throughout the enemy ranks while Artemis cries out in shock. The combination of elements creates a raging inferno that fills the entire chamber, incinerating the horde of undead. Amidst the magical vortex, a status screen materializes before Hermes. Seeing his name, he cheers, leaping into the air with excitement. He realizes that while continuing this way might be dangerous, it is incredibly effective. As the flames die down, he stands confidently at the chamber's exit, internally celebrating his perfect strategy and the experience it will yield. From behind him, a worried Artemis calls out his name. He turns to her with a reassuring smile, telling her to look. But Artemis is trembling, her hands clasped nervously. She stammers, asking if it's truly all right, confessing that it looked as if the entire room had been on fire. They both peer back into the room from the doorway. It is completely untouched, with no scorch marks or signs of the intense battle that just occurred. Hermes looks on and quietly confirms his suspicions. Artemis, utterly bewildered, asks what kind of strange place this is. Hermes glances around, noting that the monsters seem to reset, before turning to her with a cryptic response. She might be better off not knowing. He gives a thumbs up, declaring it's fine, though he internally admits that Artemis's shout startled him more than the monsters did. As more creatures appear, he laughs and suggests they continue to farm a bit longer before resuming the search for her father. After their extended time in the dungeon, evening has fallen. As they walk along a rocky path, Hermes reflects that the effort was worthwhile for him, as the battles have raised his level to 18. He turns to Artemis, noting with a serious expression that they were unable to find any trace of Count Astor. With her head lowered, she quietly affirms his statement. She looks up, her expression tinged with sadness. She confesses that while she knew from the start they were unlikely to find him so quickly, the complete lack of any clues is still disheartening. As they continue on their way, Hermes tells her to stop having such negative thoughts. He states with conviction that, even with no evidence, he believes her father is okay. Her spirits lifted by his words, Artemis agrees, murmuring that not giving up is what's important. Hermes adds to the reassurance, reminding her that her father is a skilled adventurer and is definitely still alive. He suddenly stops, his tone turning stern as he grips her shoulder. He insists that she must not go to the dungeon alone again, telling her to come to him if she needs help. Startled by his intensity, Artemis stammers out in agreement. His stern expression breaks into a playful wink as he says, "Good," before admitting he was just kidding about the tone. Relieved and beaming, Artemis promises that she will absolutely ask for his help. Back in the city, they part ways. Hermes thinks to himself that he should check his weapon before heading back, then turns to wave goodbye to Artemis and her friends, telling them he'll see them tomorrow. He continues walking, but pauses when he hears Artemis call out a thank you. He glances back to see her waving, then clicks his tongue with a hint of annoyance or embarrassment before walking on. His thoughts still lingering on his recent parting, Hermes is startled by a sudden, piercing scream echoing through the city streets. He stops short, hand instinctively going to his sword hilt, wondering about the source of the sound. He confirms to himself that he heard it clearly and breaks into a sprint, racing down the street toward the disturbance. Without slowing, he bursts through a nearby doorway. Inside, he discovers a grim scene. Two masked assailants stand over the unconscious forms of Manurva and her maid, who lie motionless on the floor. Hermes' eyes widen in shock at the sight. One of the attackers turns, demanding to know who he is. Ignoring the question, Hermes shoves the man forcefully, shouting for him to move out of the way. As the second assailant lunges, also questioning his identity, Hermes unleashes his power. He declares his spell, Nightmare, a form of dark elemental magic. A torrent of shadowy energy filled with countless, horrifying eyes erupts from his hand. The dark magic engulfs the attackers. They recoil in agony, crying out as the spell overwhelms their senses, one of them screaming that his eyes are burning. With the immediate threat neutralized, Manurva stirs on the ground below. Looking up at her rescuer with hazy eyes, she weakly identifies him as nothing more than a trespassing citizen. Suddenly, another person bursts into the alley. It is Atlas, who stops dead in his tracks and cries out Manurva's name in alarm upon seeing her lying on the ground. As Atlas reacts, Hermes kneels beside the two women. He quickly assesses their condition, noting that Manurva and her maid have only fainted. A wave of relief washes over him. His relief is short-lived. Manurva's eyes snap open, and she grabs his uniform with a start. Looking up at him with wide, confused eyes, she asks why he is there and if he is hurt, her concern overriding her disorientation. This encounter marks a deviation, an event not meant to occur in a main story. With the two masked assailants now bound and unconscious, Hermes explains to a stunned Manurva that he was nearby and neutralized them. He confirms that the ropes and blanket were pulled from his personal inventory, advising her to keep the incident quiet to avoid unnecessary trouble. Overcome with relief, Manurva expresses her heartfelt thanks for being saved, to which Hermes replies that he is simply glad she is unharmed. Her maid, overwhelmed with emotion, pulls Manurva into a tight embrace, murmuring how relieved she is that her lady is safe. While being held, Manurva's expression hardens with resolve. She swears an oath by her house to surely repay this debt. Hermes, however, calmly informs her that he has already used holy magic to heal her maid's wounds and that she should awaken soon. Her gaze turns to him, her eyes sparkling with adoration as she calls him a fairy tale prince. Hermes attempts to downplay her praise, insisting she owes him nothing as he acted only because he wanted to help. He adds that as a duke's son, he is accustomed to getting what he wants through his own efforts. She continues, comparing him to the heroes from the stories she adored as a child. The earnest praise causes Hermes to blush, as he internally reflects on the embarrassment of receiving such accolades, given his memories of an ordinary past life. His flustered reaction makes Manurva stop short, her own face flushing as she realizes she may have been too forward. She stammers, trying to take back her words. He quickly regains his composure and assures her that he understands, putting her at ease. As she sighs in relief, Hermes privately notes her continued fondness for such stories, finding it rather cute and deciding to keep the thought to himself. Later, after escorting Manurva to the gates of her residence, Hermes walks away alone. He reflects on the situation, having left the bandits with the guards, and feels confident that she is now safe. He dismisses her gratitude, believing his actions were only natural. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted by a sudden, chilling realization. He stops, a look of dawning comprehension on his face, as he identifies the event that just transpired, Manurva's kidnapping incident. He processes the gravity of this new information. He knows for a fact that in the early stages of the game, Love Soar, a kidnapping of the heroine never occurred. Even within Manurva's own dedicated story route, she was never abducted. This event was something the game never showed, because it never happened. No matter how he looks at it, the situation is undeniably strange. He remained deeply unsettled, leaning on his sword as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He could only hope that the men he'd handed over to the guards would provide some useful information. Still, even with that possibility, a very bad feeling about the whole affair persisted. Deciding against rash action, he resolved to wait for a report rather than investigating alone. But as he stood in contemplation, a sudden, jarring sensation struck him, his eyes widening in alarm. The feeling was unmistakable, a cold shiver that ran through his entire body. He had sensed something, a distinct presence somewhere in the city streets before him. He scanned the moonlit rooftops, briefly wondering if it was just his imagination. The thought was immediately dismissed. The feeling had been too real. The sensation solidified into a grim certainty. Gazing out over the capital, he was convinced that something truly bad was looming over the city. Meanwhile, perched high above on a rooftop, a mysterious cloaked figure observed from the shadows. They were impressed, noting with a smirk that the boy was quite sharp to have detected them. The figure mused on this unexpected development. This boy, they considered, might just prove useful for their plan. They delved deeper into their knowledge, identifying him as Hermes von Lunicelia. They recalled that he possessed exceptional magical talent, just like the girl who had previously slipped through their grasp. His detection ability, however, was troublesome. It had the potential to expose their entire operation. With this assessment made, the figure decided on a new course. They would make use of Harold and the others. Turning away, they reaffirmed their primary objective, the capture of Manurva. Unaware of the specific plot now aimed at his friend, Hermes stood thoughtfully amidst a bustling crowd, flanked by Manurva and Artemis. The sounds of the city square filled the air around them. He stood alone, contemplating the impossible events that had transpired. The protagonist of this world acting out of character, the main heroine Manurva being abducted. These were things that should never have happened. He could feel the presence of something beyond the normal, a clear sign that this world was diverging from the one he knew. A maid's voice cut through his thoughts, wishing him a good morning. As he looked at the number plate on his door, the realization solidified in his mind. This world was not the same as he remembered. Upon arriving at school, he was startled to see Manurva waving at him. He couldn't understand why she would be there, especially after having been nearly kidnapped just the night before. She approached, her cheeks flushed, and expressed her sincere gratitude for his help. Thanks to him, she explained, she was completely unharmed. Hermes suggested that it would be better for her to rest, but Manurva simply smiled, stating that as a student, her place was at school. Still, she acknowledged his concern before insisting on properly thanking him. She continued, admitting it was no small feat to convince her weeping father to let her come. Hearing this, Hermes felt a bead of sweat, thinking that Duke Sunlight must have been worried sick. He briefly wondered if she had actually resorted to punching her father to get her way. He voiced his concern, suggesting that her father's worry was a good reason to stay home. Manurva puffed her cheeks, asking pointedly if wanting to see him to express her thanks wasn't a good enough reason to come. The directness of her question caught Hermes off guard. Had she truly come to school just to thank him? Her words made him hesitate. He thought that if it were any other girl, he might believe her, but coming from the main heroine, it sounded like a fabrication. He insisted she could have rested for a few days, but Manurva countered that it was only natural to want to see the face of her savior. As Hermes began to protest, she playfully covered his mouth with her hand, chiding him that nitpicky men are disliked and that a gentleman would just smile and let slide. With a wink, she pulled her hand away. She added that her parents were also deeply grateful and that they would properly express their thanks later, as was expected of nobles. She complimented him on being very dutiful. Later that day, during combat practice, Hermes watched as Manurva cheerfully greeted the other students. He observed her, noting that she was acting as if the traumatic kidnapping incident had never even happened. Their sparring match began, and he was immediately taken aback. Manurva pressed her attack. Her strength vastly increased. "You've grown so much stronger in just a single day, haven't you?" she commented, breathing heavily. As he struggled to block her strike, Hermes realized the truth. His own training in the dungeon must have somehow triggered a similar, drastic improvement in her. He finds himself fielding an unexpected question from Manurva, who asks if she too would grow stronger by going to the dungeon. He confirms that she would, but quickly cautions her to get permission and take guards, stressing that it would be a problem if she were to die. She then asks if that's what he did to get stronger, catching him off guard. He stammers out an affirmative before she turns away with a confident smile, promising not to do anything reckless. As she departs, he slumps over a table, sighing with exhaustion from the day's many troubles. A sudden, alarming thought strikes him. In the original story, the heroine is supposed to go to the dungeon with the protagonist, Atlas, not alone. A short while later, his maid, Fran, approaches with a letter. She informs him it is a letter of thanks for his aid to Manurva and reads the contents aloud. An invitation to a tea party the following Sunday. He notes that since his father was also invited, it would be improper to refuse. Resigned but determined, he instructs Fran to bring him a pen and paper to reply to Duke's Sunlight. He reasons that if he can use the opportunity to learn more about the kidnapping incident, it will be a worthwhile trade-off for a day's training. Meanwhile, Manurva walks through the school grounds, practice sword in hand. She muses to herself that sending such a formal letter is a very noble-like thing to do, a reflection on the social distance that remains despite them being classmates. The next morning, Artemis von Asta approaches Hermes, greeting him warmly. She notes how lovely he looks before explaining that she had wanted to thank him for his help back at the dungeon. He tells her not to worry about it, adding that since they share the same goals, he had also wanted to meet her father. Bowing deeply, Artemis thanks him again, mentioning that it is getting late. Continuing their conversation, Hermes asks if she still plans to search for clues about her father. Artemis confirms this, stating her intention to visit a place called the Denver. Hermes considers this, remarking that it sounds like a good place to train both magic and sword skills. Based on her plan, he proposes they tackle the final boss area together. Artemis expresses surprise, reminding him that while they can't handle the boss of an intermediate dungeon, the boss of a beginner dungeon like the Den is only around level 30. He smiles, reassuring her that she can rely on him as much as she wants and shouldn't worry about being a bother. His directness makes Artemis blush and stammer his name. At that moment, they are interrupted by the arrival of Manurva von Sunlight, who greets them both. Manurva immediately eyes them with suspicion, asking what they were doing. Hermes casually claims they were making a secret promise, which throws Artemis into a panic. She frantically denies that it's anything weird, insisting he was just helping her, a statement Manurva pointedly questions. The situation intensifies as Manurva grabs Hermes, pulling him alarmingly close. She demands a thorough explanation of how, exactly, he was helping Artemis. Caught off guard by her proximity, Hermes internally registers her pleasant scent but also recognizes the danger of the confrontation. Flustered, Hermes tries to de-escalate, pleading for her to understand as the matter concerns Artemis's privacy. He adds that they would both be in trouble if their parents found out. Manurva huffs, seemingly at her limit. It is only then that Hermes realizes he is still holding Artemis's hand and quickly lets go. He attempts to restore order, suggesting they take Artemis to the classroom before the bell rings. He then turns his attention back to Manurva, asking what she wanted. She explains that her earlier actions were simply noble etiquette. She then reveals the true reason for her appearance. She received an invitation to a tea party from Duke Sunlight for him. Since they are in the same class, she questions why a formal invitation was sent instead of him just being told directly. She explains that the invitation is also a gesture of thanks for saving her, and that she will, of course, be attending as well. Hermes remarks that it feels a bit too formal, but internally, he is struck by her cheerful expression, thinking to himself how cute she is. His thoughts drift to his previous life, where he never even faced a single criminal. Yet now he has become a hero just a month after reincarnating, a title that feels like something out of a light novel. Manurva overhears him muttering and reassures him, stating that he should be proud, as he is the hero who saved a duke's daughter. As she speaks, Hermes spots Artemis wishing everyone a good morning. A wave of panic washes over him, as he wonders if Manurva's affection for him has risen. He desperately hopes it is just his imagination. On the day of the appointment, the weather is wonderful, perfect for a tea party. Hermes, Artemis, and Manurva walk together towards the gates where a carriage awaits. They soon arrive at their destination. Before a grand and imposing structure, Manurva turns and formally welcomes them to the Sunlight Palace. As they are led through the grounds, Manurva recalls that Hermes' last visit was during the previous year's winter party, remembering how the unusual snow created a dreamlike scene. Hermes, however, is focused on the gravity of the situation, reminding himself that the Sunlight Duke House is even older and more established than his own Lunacelia family. He steels himself, thinking he must remain calm. Manurva continues, expressing a desire to see the snowy scenery with him again. Internally, Hermes panics. He recognizes this as the beginning of a crucial event from the game's first year. Believing he is just a mob character, he feels he must not intervene in such plot points and dismisses the idea, thinking that winter is dangerous. She gently takes his arm, urging him to come along. She explains that her father and the others are eagerly awaiting his arrival and that they must hurry. Inside, a large, boisterous man with a prominent mustache greets him with a booming welcome. Is Duke Sunlight. Hermes bows deeply, sincerely appreciating the kind invitation to the tea party. The Duke laughs it off, saying it was no problem at all. He then comments that with looks like Hermes's, he must have a hard time with women. Hermes observes that despite the Duke's great presence, he has a way of making people feel at ease. He watches as his father, Duke Lunicilia, greets Manurva with a flourish, telling her she grows brighter each day. The Duke adds that hearing this gives him confidence, prompting Hermes to wryly observe that his own flair for the dramatic must be inherited. Before Duke Lunicilia can continue, Duke Sunlight interrupts with a hearty laugh, chiding him for reminiscing about old times before discussing Manurva. He remarks that Duke Lunicilia has hardly changed since their student days, unlike himself. Manurva agrees with her father, adding that the splendor of Duke Sunlight and his wife is something to be envied. The Duke jests in response to his daughter's praise, but his expression quickly sobers. He turns his attention to the matter at hand, formally thanking Hermes for saving Manurva. He admits with gratitude that without Hermes' intervention, his daughter's fate would have been grim. Manurva affirms this, stating that she is only safe because of Hermes. As Duke Lunicilia shifts uncomfortably, Duke Sunlight's demeanor turns to rage. He seethes about the kidnappers, wishing to crush them himself, and asks Hermes if he's curious about their identities. Taking a calm sip of tea, Hermes agrees that the criminals will be dealt with, but emphasizes that gathering information is the priority. His father, meanwhile, seems to have forgotten that Duke Sunlight himself was almost a victim. He internally reflects that his earlier comment about the Duke's carefree nature was sarcasm, but his father takes it at face value, agreeing enthusiastically. Duke Lunicilia praises Duke Sunlight's admirable hot-bloodedness, contrasting it with Grail's cool demeanor. With a wry apology, Duke Sunlight calls his old friend a sly one. The conversation then shifts to the broader implications of the attack. Seated together in an elegant gazebo, Duke Sunlight questions if the incident is connected to the recent string of kidnappings. Duke Lunicilia confirms that while he isn't certain, he believes they are likely related, prompting a questioning, "What?" from Hermes. The implication dawns on him. There must be a mastermind behind all. He silently vows to kill the person responsible once they are found. Duke Sunlight elaborates, suggesting the perpetrators either have a large organization or an expert in their ranks. Duke Lunicilia agrees, proposing they disclose the information to the Academy students for their own protection. When Duke Sunlight asks Hermes for any intelligence, he recalls hearing about a capable swordsman. The Duke adds a crucial detail. A female spear user was with the swordsman. This detail startles Hermes. He realizes with a jolt that the spear user class never existed in the original game, which is why the report stuck in his mind. The Duke continues, revealing that the assailants Hermes apprehended were compiling a list of individuals who possess magic. Hermes questions if magic users were the target, and Duke Sunlight confirms it, though the motive remains a mystery. He notes that this intelligence from the Duke corroborates information he had already gathered at the Academy. He elaborates that while someone supposedly commissioned the list, the claim is unverified. The targets were not just unregistered orphans and commoners, but also students from a noble academy. Duke Sunlight remarks on the hurried and strange nature of the kidnappings. Hermes silently processes this new information, agreeing that the situation is indeed weird. He processes the grim reality. If the criminal's goal is as suspected, his own magical talent makes him a definite target. His father, Duke Lunicilia, confirms this concern, stating that Hermes is more than just talented and therefore in danger. The realization dawns on Hermes that a massive, sinister plan must be lurking behind these events. As both his father and Duke Sunlight look on with concern, Hermes refuses to remain passive, announcing to the two men that he has a clever plan. He tells them not to speak of such unpleasant things, but Manurva, who is beside him, seizes the moment. She reasons that since she may also be targeted, it would be best for her to stay together with him. She brightly explains her simple logic. If they always act together, they can help each other if attacked. Hermes is completely flabbergasted by her forwardness, demanding she explain herself immediately. His father, however, thoughtfully considers the proposal, murmuring that it is not a bad idea. He instantly sees through her scheme, realizing she is thinking this is a perfect opportunity to get closer to him. Still, he concedes the logic of her point. He is strong enough to protect her, and since she can also use magic, they can effectively support one another. Duke Sunlight, however, loudly objects, arguing that a young woman spending all her time with a man could damage Manurva's reputation. Hermes quickly seconds the objection, though his internal reasoning is entirely different. More than anything, he doesn't want to lose his freedom. The Duke continues his protest, adding that if they're always together, it would be like they were lovers, making them even easier targets. Sensing Hermes' hesitation, Manurva confronts him directly, asking if he considers her a burden. As he fumbles for a response, she presses, asking if he would rather be with Artemis, since she has nothing to do with the situation. With a pleading expression, she confesses that she worries about him as well, and believes that staying close to him would ease that feeling. Her earnest appeal leaves Hermes blushing and speechless. Witnessing his daughter's heartfelt plea, Duke Sunlight groans in defeat. He concedes that he understands her feelings and, making an exception just this once, turns to Hermes. He formally entrusts Manurva to him, asking him to protect her. The sudden reversal leaves Hermes stunned, as he never imagined the Duke would agree. Duke Lunicilia sighs, remarking that Duke Sunlight spoils his daughter far too much, which makes Hermes, for the first time in his new life, want to punch a man's father. Manurva, meanwhile, declares her proposal accepted, happy that they can now spend more time together. Utterly outmaneuvered, Hermes can only agree, certain she planned this from the start. Minerva von Sunlight recalls her observations of Hermes von Lunicilia at the academy. He was a prodigy, yet carried a weary, uninterested air, never showing the slightest sign of returning any girl's affections. She remembers how that fact struck her when they first met. Hermes Sama never even looked at her. Her thoughts drift to his solitary nature. He wasn't one for mingling with others, content to sit apart, defined by his talent. A worry had taken root in her mind that he might get hurt by this isolation someday. She remembers their frequent encounters at noble parties. Despite his distance, he always treated everyone with curt politeness, offering only the barest of greetings. Those brief meetings left questions overflowing within her. Why did he always look so lonely? With his talent, why didn't he act more boldly? Why did no one ever stand by his side? It was only recently that she finally found the answer. She came to understand that he had been alone from the very beginning because his talent was simply too far beyond everyone else's. He wasn't being pretentious. He was weary of the gap it created. Upon realizing this, she understood his loneliness and why he chose to blend in, even hiding his gift just to have simple interactions with others. She could only imagine how unbearably desolate and suffocating it must have been for him. This understanding drove her to push herself through endless training, determined to close the gap between them. Yet, at the same time, she couldn't help but resent that her own strength was less than his. She resolved that, as a fellow noble blessed with strong magic, she could be the one to stand beside him in his solitude. She then recalls a change in him. It was as though he had cast off his burdens. The dark feelings that once lingered in his eyes vanished, and he grew brighter, becoming like a different person who was truly enjoying life. Her feelings for him evolved, from rivalry to curiosity, and then to friendship. Each time they spoke, she was drawn in deeper. Something had happened to Hermes, and though she didn't know what it was, the change was undeniable. Then came the kidnapping incident. When she was helpless against her captors, Hermes Sama came to her rescue. It was in that moment she realized her heart was racing uncontrollably. His heroic arrival reminded her of the prince on a white horse from her favorite childhood storybook. She continues her internal reflection, a gentle smile gracing her lips as she realizes that simply recalling her feelings for Hermes fills her with happiness. Across the table, Hermes looks back with wide-eyed surprise at her sudden change in demeanor. Her heart pounds as she mentally retraces the evolution of her affection, a path that led from rivalry to curiosity and then to friendship. This journey culminates in a single, undeniable feeling. As she looks up with a faint blush, Hermes takes a sip of tea, seemingly coming to his own, separate conclusion about the situation. He, however, feels completely out of place. Listening to the boisterous laughter of Duke Sunlight and the quiet commentary of his own father, Hermes feels like an outsider at a class reunion he can't participate in. His attention is then drawn back to Minerva, who has been staring at him. He asks if there is something on his face, but she quickly denies it. Her intense, unreadable gaze leaves him completely baffled. The gathering begins to conclude as Duke Sunlight announces he must depart for the royal palace. As he wishes them a safe trip, Hermes internally sighs with relief, glad the awkward event is finally over. As they part ways, Minerva simply says she will see him at the academy, to which he can only stammer a yes. Watching her leave, he wonders if he did something to upset her and resolves to keep his distance, fearing that being disliked by his favorite character would be a huge emotional blow. A week later, on a Sunday, Hermes walks with a spring in his step. He had expected Minerva to drag him around on his day off, but she had only asked him to keep her company for a while. He celebrates his unexpected freedom with a triumphant internal cheer. With his day now his own, he hurries off with a grateful smile, calling out his thanks as he departs. He arrives to find Artemis waiting. Calling out to her, he apologizes in case he kept her waiting. She turns and reassures him that she just got there herself, much to his relief. She confirms their destination for the day, the beginner dungeon lair. Hermes agrees, though he internally notes that despite being just classmates, the situation feels like a cliché romantic comedy exchange. She then asks if this will be similar to the training he undertook in the Corridor of Lament. He confirms it is, and Artemis, understanding, suggests they proceed. She adds that they might find traces of a certain person there, which aligns with Hermes' own goal of trying something new. His objective for the day is clear: proficiency grinding. A mental check of his status confirms his progress. At level 18, his physical and intellectual attributes are balanced. His magical skills are all at an intermediate level, with fire being the most advanced, while his swordsmanship still has room to grow. As they step into the dungeon's entrance, a stone-carved tunnel, Artemis observes that it looks similar to the Corridor of Lament. He agrees, remarking that while the corridor was designed as a horror-themed labyrinth, this dungeon is clearly designed to mimic nature. They emerge from the tunnel into a vast, sunlit forest. Artemis gasps in awe at the sight. She stammers an affirmative, still taking in the scenery. Hermes instructs her to stay close as they press forward. As they walk, she glances around and asks if he is familiar with this particular dungeon. He answers with confidence, stating that he knows it well, including the number of monsters they are likely to encounter. His confidence hangs in the air as they pause, surveying the path ahead through the dense woods. Artemis appears uncertain. Her hesitation gives way to a confession. Trembling, she admits that she is weak. Unfazed, Hermes asks if she has a weapon. When she confirms she does, he reassures her, suggesting that if she feels capable, she should try fighting as well. He then explains that this particular lair is a dungeon that prioritizes group strength over individual might. As Artemis processes this surprising information, a sudden rustling from the surrounding foliage signals an imminent threat. A horde of monstrous creatures, fanged rabbits, multi-eyed foxes, and other twisted woodland beasts, erupts from the undergrowth, charging directly at them. Artemis freezes, her eyes wide with pure shock and terror at the sudden onslaught. He steps forward, placing himself between Artemis and the charging beasts. "Here we go," he declares, and with a swift motion, unleashes a torrent of what appears to be wind magic. Countless blades of energy slice through the air, decimating the entire horde in a single, overwhelming instant. Artemis can only stare, dumbfounded by the display, her mind reeling at how it all happened in a flash. He turns to her with a calm smile, asking if she saw. He explains that in the games he remembers, this lair was considered the best place for raising one's proficiency to an intermediate level, adding that the monsters are so weak a level 1 could beat them. Just then, new monsters begin to appear. Again, Artemis exclaims, startled. Hermes confirms it, noting that the monsters here respawn very quickly. Taking a deep breath and steeling her resolve, she extends her hand towards an approaching creature. Focusing her energy, she incants the spell, Wind Cutter. A small, swirling vortex of air forms at her fingertips. The spell strikes true, felling a monster. Her face lights up with a mixture of shock and elation. "I did it! I did it!" she exclaims, turning to Hermes with her hands clasped in excitement. She proudly asks if he saw her beat the monster, even if it was just one. He gives a thumbs up and replies with an encouraging, "Yeah, that's amazing." Amidst the lingering effects of their battle, Hermes praises Artemis for her good instincts. A little flustered but pleased, she admits that she's starting to feel more confident and promises to do her best. Putting her words into action, Artemis unleashes a powerful wind-slash attack, cutting through the air as Hermes watches from nearby, ready for the next engagement. The fight concludes, but it has taken its toll on Artemis. She sways, completely drained of mana and unable to move. Hermes, who conserved his own energy, notes that this should stop any more creatures from approaching them for now. He helps her to the ground, suggesting they rest until her power recovers. With a sigh, she thanks him. Looking at him with admiration, Artemis remarks on how amazing he is, acknowledging that even knowing the Lunacelia family's reputation for being gifted, his abilities are still astonishing. She points out that he fought harder than she did, yet shows no signs of injury or exhaustion. Earnestly, she asks how she can become like him. Her resolve hardens as she declares her desire to be strong enough to one day accompany her father on his journeys. He explains that his strength was forged through constant battles and practice, recommending she train in dungeons like this one. Though dangerous, he continues, every monster defeated grants experience and skill proficiency. Internally, Hermes realizes her motivation is not for herself, but to protect her father. He sees her as a righteous blade, completely different from his own pursuit of freedom. Artemis affirms her understanding. Clenching his fist, Hermes encourages her, telling her that once she grows stronger, she can focus on mastering her own unique power. Inspired by his words, her face flushes with determination. She clenches her own fists and declares with newfound resolve that she will give dungeon training a try. She asks if he truly means it, and Hermes readily confirms, offering to help whenever she needs and telling her not to hesitate to ask. He sees no reason to refuse. In fact, he is curious to see how much others can grow. Overjoyed, Artemis thanks him profusely and vows to show him how strong she can become. Hermes agrees they should work hard together and suggests they practice swordsmanship next, privately looking forward to witnessing her growth. He watches as Artemis expertly dispatches a monster, confidently telling him to leave the fighting to her. He readily agrees. As she continues to fight, she mentions that her father is still missing. He observes her technique, impressed by her swordsmanship, a skill undoubtedly honed by her adventurer father, but also notes that she lacks the adaptability of someone like Manurva. He informs her that they should be approaching the next area soon, and she confirms, pointing ahead. She remarks on how deep into the dungeon they ventured, and he agrees. Their path opens into a wide, circular clearing marked with an intricate stone pattern. In the center lies a large, sleeping creature, leaving Artemis bewildered. The sleeping beast is the boss of this beginner dungeon lair. As Artemis questions what it is, Hermes calmly identifies it as the boss, a lycanthrope. She looks at him with concern, asking if he can truly defeat a monster of that size. He assures her that he can, explaining that every dungeon contains a uniquely powerful monster known as a boss. He elaborates that boss monsters are confined to their designated areas. With a confident smile, he promises to present its head to her and tells her to simply watch as he steps across the boundary into the boss's domain. His entry awakens the beast. The lycanthrope rises to its full, bipedal height, its massive form looming over him. He simply looks up, taking in the sight. A grin spreads across his face as a single thought crosses his mind. The creature is huge. The lycanthrope lets out a low, menacing growl. He acknowledges the eager expression on his own face, telling himself not to worry. With a determined glint in his eye, he realizes he has no intention of running and readies his blade for the confrontation. He met the beast's roar with a confident grin, his sword held ready. The battle against the lycanthrope had begun. A massive, wolf-like beast swipes its claws at Hermes, who parries the blow with his sword. The young man is taken aback by the creature's sheer speed, narrowly dodging and blocking its ferocious assault. Observing from a safe distance, Atlas smirks. He analyzes the fight, noting that the lycanthrope's attack pattern is predictable, but its raw stats are superior. He reflects that Hermes is only level 19, whereas the beast is a level 25 specializing in high-speed close combat. If Hermes lets his guard down and gets caught in a combo, he'll be defeated instantly. The pressure is immense. With the lycanthrope's claws scraping against his blade just inches from his face, Hermes grits his teeth into a strained grin, fully aware that he is at a disadvantage. Atlas, however, sees the situation differently, believing Hermes is winning with ease. He thinks that facing a stronger opponent is the perfect catalyst for growth. As the beast lunges again, Hermes finds he is growing accustomed to the pace, a thrill building within him. As their blades clash, Atlas shouts advice from the sidelines. He tells Hermes that while he possesses speed, his attack patterns are too simple. He suggests incorporating a kick, emphasizing that in a direct duel like this, agility is paramount. He takes the words to heart, realizing that a speed-focused fighter can win by landing even minor hits, since a powerful strike is useless if it misses. Dodging another attack, he confirms the lycanthrope is slower than him. He knows he needs more than simple counters, and an idea begins to form. With his new plan solidifying, Hermes decides to put it to the test. He recalls his previous failed attempt to use wind element magic for movement enhancement. This time, however, he has a revelation. Magic is not limited to being cast from one's hands. Facing the snarling beast, Hermes resolves to imagine his entire body becoming a missile. The idea becomes reality. In a blinding flash of motion, Hermes propels himself forward, transforming into a living projectile that slams directly into the lycanthrope's chest with devastating force. His expression is one of pure, focused intensity as he channels the wind magic, his body cutting through the air to deliver the powerful blow. His body, propelled by wind magic, became a living projectile, streaking through the air with blinding speed. The attack slammed into the lycanthrope, sending a shockwave through its powerful frame and knocking it violently backward. Landing softly a short distance away, he glanced back at the motionless beast. The technique had worked perfectly. He considered a name for his creation, settling on acceleration magic. In that moment of impact, the creature had let out a final, agonized roar as its body was overwhelmed by the force of the blow. For Hermes, however, the experience was pure bliss. He reveled in the thrill of pushing past his limits, realizing that this was the true joy of life. Creating new magic that never existed in the game, that he thought was real fun. With a final cry of acceleration, his fist, wreathed in concentrated wind, had smashed directly into the side of the lycanthrope's head. As the dust settled around the fallen beast, Hermes sighed, remarking that it was over already. Nearby, Atlas calmly informed his stunned Artemis that the fight was concluded. Clapping her hands in delight, she could only exclaim how amazing it was. A new spell had been born, and a powerful foe defeated in a single strike. Artemis expresses her disbelief and amazement at Hermes' feat, finding it incredible that he defeated such a powerful monster. He responds with a simple, confident chuckle. She presses on, but he explains his method. He used wind to blast himself forward and created a cushion of wind under his shoes to prevent injury. Artemis is taken aback, questioning if using magic on himself hurt. His unconventional tactic leaves Artemis deeply impressed, thinking to herself that Hermes is truly amazing. She finds his relentless curiosity reminiscent of her own father. Hearing this comparison to the famed adventurer, Hermes accepts it as a true honor. As they walk away from the battle site, Artemis observes that even the monster's den has vanished. Hermes agrees and mentions that for what he recalls, her father was a very famous figure. He expresses surprise that she knew so little about him, as he was only mentioned by name. They agree it's time to head back. Her expression hardens with determination. Artemis declares that she has found her resolve. She will look after her father and strive to become as strong as Hermes. He smiles, telling her that's good and that perhaps she'll find what she's looking for next time. A record of Hermes von Lunacelia's status reveals his progress. At age 15 and level 22, his core attributes are VIT, AGI, and INT are all balanced at 73. His magic proficiency is at an intermediate level for most elements, though his wind magic lags behind. His swordsmanship is still at a beginner level, while his charisma is exceptionally high at 100. By evening, they finally emerge from the dungeon, exhausted. Hermes commends Artemis on her performance. He observes that while her stamina is depleted, her magical power and combat movements grew sharper during their time inside. He concludes that she has grown significantly stronger, and her abilities suggest she's a speed-type fighter. His praise catches her off guard. A blush spreads across her face as she stammers, processing his assessment that she has become stronger. The fluster gives way to a burst of renewed motivation. Artemis strikes a determined pose, vowing to do her best and work hard to make him proud. Taken aback by her sudden vigor, Hermes offers encouragement, stating he looks forward to seeing her results in the upcoming exams. As they prepare to depart, a confident smile plays on Hermes' lips. He internally muses that he has a few ideas of his own to test before the exams, anticipating the challenge with relish. "All right, let's go back," he says, leading the way. He reflected on his progress as time flowed onward into May. It had taken half a month, but he felt he had finally achieved something substantial. With his preparations seemingly complete, he clenched a fist, steeling himself. It was time to face the great exams, which he recognized as the very first common event from the game, Lovely Sorcerer. He recalled the game's logic. Normally, one would raise a heroine's affection through daily interactions. However, during these common events, the protagonist could significantly increase their standing with a specific heroine, as these were story moments every route had to pass through. This particular exam consisted of 3 parts: written, magic, and swordsmanship. A heroine's affection would rise depending on the player's individual and total rankings. He remembered the conditions. For Manurva, one needed to place in the top 3 in all exams. For the heroines, he mentally labeled Leah and Freya. A high score was the requirement. He dismissed the thought, reminding himself that as a mere side character, it didn't concern him. For the past month, he had pushed himself to the limit, and now he was simply eager to have his objective ability evaluated. With a sharp grin, he decided to make it fun. His reverie was broken by Manurva, who greeted him as Hermes Sama. She observed that he seemed thoroughly prepared and quite confident for the day's exam. He returned her greeting, noting that they wouldn't actually be fighting. Internally, however, he reaffirmed his own path. As a side character, he had to turn everything he saw into an opportunity for growth. He was sure Manurva would achieve results beyond anything he could imagine. In response, she declared that she would still blow him away. As the starting bell chimed for the written test, Hermes wryly thought that her competitive fire was definitely the influence of that hot-blooded protagonist. As his pen flew across the paper, he found the test to be far too easy. He considered that while his past life's memory and his natural intellect were both assets, the sheer ease of the task might be an intelligence stat bonus. A peculiar feeling washed over him as he wrote. He finished the entire test in just 10 minutes, with 40 minutes still remaining. He mused that if he'd had stat corrections like this in his previous life, everything would have been simpler. After a quick review, he decided to use the remaining time for mental preparation for the next exam. He and his classmates moved from the written exam to the second training ground for the magic test. An examiner announces the next phase and calls for the first participant to step onto the stage. From his place in the crowd, he observes the other students. He recalls that this part of the exam is target practice and notes that everyone is using basic spells with short chance. His attention is then drawn to Leah as she prepares her spell. He muses that the average performance of the other students is understandable, as they haven't leveled up properly. The examiner asks for Lee's name and class. In a stunning display, she unleashes 4 distinct elemental spells in quick succession: a watery aqua bubble, an explosive flame burst, a swirling verdant storm, and a crushing rock tomb. The powerful demonstration concludes, leaving Leah with a confident, almost smug, expression. Hermes internally identifies her as Leah Rientina, one of the main heroines from the game, Lovely Sorcerer. Her performance earns her the unofficial title of the Magic Prodigy from the stunned crowd. An examiner calls for the targets to be replaced. Hermes recalls that in the game, Lee's magical talent was famous, ranking just below the protagonist's. He analyzes her technique, noting that she used 4 mid-tier spells with shortened chance. This high firepower confirms to him that she has definitely leveled up. He also reflects that he and the game's protagonist are historical irregularities due to their rare holy and dark affinities. While the crowd marvels at her control over the 4 basic elements, the examiner calls the next name, Hermes von Lunacelia. A spark of excitement ignites within Hermes. He sees Leah not as a game character, but as a fellow explorer of magic. As he walks forward, he overhears students whispering. One notes he wasn't popular before, but another brings up his duel with Manurva and his compatibility with every element, suggesting he's even more amazing than Leah. The chatter is a minor annoyance. He steps onto the stage, his focus narrowing. He knows the examiner will assess his magic power and the number of attributes he can use. Facing the proctor, he calmly confirms that he is ready to begin. He resolved to do things his own way. As he steeled his gaze, the examiner noted that just being able to handle 2 elements is impressive, recalling that even their homeroom teacher, Teresa, had once been the center of attention during this very exam. With that thought, he began his demonstration. Raising a hand, he summoned not 1, but 6 distinct spheres of magic, each representing a different element, which swirled into existence around him. The sight left the examiner utterly stunned, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. She stammered, realizing he was casting multiple spells all at once. Hermes knew this was a technique he had spent ages refining, a skill developed outside the original game's mechanics that had taken him forever to master. The examiner could only confirm the impossible reality before her. He recalled the immense difficulty of this feat normally. Only 1 spell could be activated at a time, as parallel casting makes control exponentially harder. However, he had overcome that limitation. He decided to exclude the dark magic for this display, as it was primarily for debuffs. It was a technique that required absolute control and precision, and he knew that even with his full stats and daily growth, he had barely managed to contain the power. With his preparations complete, he thrust his hand forward, unleashing the torrent of power in a technique he called multicast. The 5 distinct elemental spells converged, twisting together into a single, overwhelming beam of raw magical energy that shot across the examination hall. It struck the reinforced target wall with devastating force, shattering it into a cloud of dust and fragments. The resulting shockwave sent the stunned audience, including Leah and Simon Gatiss, scrambling for cover. Hermes, looking slightly taken aback by the sheer destructive output, offered a sheepish apology. The tremor was so powerful that in an adjacent building where written exams were in progress, Duke Lunacelia was startled by the shaking. The examination hall trembles. Where a reinforced wall once stood, there is now only a gaping hole and rubble, the structure utterly destroyed. The assembled students, including Atlas, stare in stunned silence. In the foreground, Hermes looks at his own hand, a bead of sweat tracing his temple as he realizes with a grimace, "Crap, I overdid it." His display of power leaves Eurysthea bewildered. She turns to him, asking what just happened. Hermes can only offer a sheepish apology, admitting that even he hadn't expected such a result. As he walks away, he internally processes the event. He concludes it's safe to assume he is the only one capable of multicasting and that his job here is done. Behind him, the other students erupt in a clamor, unable to comprehend how a reinforced wall could be vaporized and questioning the immense amount of mana required for such a feat. He strides confidently down the hall, announcing that he will leave the rest to the teachers and examiners. The stunned crowd of students parts before him as he declares it's time to move on. Rejoining Atlas and Eurysthea, Hermes remarks with satisfaction that things are proceeding just like in the game. With a determined look, he states it's time to focus on the final test. The final exam is swordsmanship. In the center of the arena, Atlas clashes blades with the instructor, Simon Gatiss. The objective is to fight a real knight and receive a score based on one's performance. Watching from the sidelines, Hermes discusses the match with Atlas. The instructor, Simon, overhears and explains with a smirk that this was only in the game. He elaborates that in the game, the knight was fixed at level 30 while the player's level cap was lower, making it a fight one literally could not win. An examiner then calls for the next participant to state their name and class. Hermes steps up to the registration desk, declaring that he is currently level 30. He reflects on the entire month he spent grinding non-stop in dungeons to boost his stats. He realizes that with his current strength, he might be able to break what was supposed to be a scripted loss event in the game, as a notification confirms his proficiency has increased. His eyes shine with intense excitement. More than just a test, he sees this as an opportunity to taste a real knight's swordsmanship. To him, this is the best event ever. However, his enthusiasm is met with cold glares. He turns, slightly taken aback, to see a group of his peers, including Artemis, looking at him with open disdain and hostility. He realized the hostility wasn't directed at him, but at a girl nearby who seemed to be in a difficult situation. A blonde-haired student loomed over her with a malicious grin, demanding she speak and calling her a failure. The blonde student and his 2 companions continued their harassment, questioning how someone they called Aptitude Zero Trash could have even taken a magic exam at a magic academy and what kind of connection she used to get in. As the girl stood silently with her head bowed, Hermes' memory sparked. He recognized her as Sarah Chrysanthemum, the daughter of a baron. He recalled that she was well known, but for reasons that had earned her a thoroughly negative reputation. The bullies sneered about her Aptitude Zero status, dismissing her as a low-ranking noble's daughter with no connections. The truth of her situation was a persistent rumor. Despite aptitude tests showing she possessed an affinity for holy magic, she was unable to use any of the 6 primary attributes. Over time, this unsolved mystery led to people calling her a failure. Hermes was surprised. This character and her unique predicament were not part of the game he knew. Hearing the commotion, Hermes stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. He asked if she was all right, startling the bullies who recognized him. He turned to the 3 of them, his expression cold. "You three should stay silent," he commanded. The blonde student retorted that Hermes shouldn't interfere, declaring Sarah a disgrace to the academy. Ignoring the bully, Hermes focused on Sarah, asking gently if it was just his imagination or if she was being bullied. The girl stammered, unable to form a coherent response. The blonde student interjected with a sneer, stating he'd heard about her. He mocked her for having both mana and aptitude, but being unable to use magic. With her head bowed, Sarah quietly admitted that it was true. Leaning closer, Hermes encouraged her not to be discouraged, suggesting there must be a reason for her condition. He told her that being different isn't a flaw and that she might possess a hidden talent. Internally, he mused that discovering her secret could be interesting and beneficial for his own growth. The blonde student laughed, declaring Hermes' words to be too much. He insisted that Sarah was simply a failure, adding that she couldn't even use a sword properly. Caught off guard by Hermes' defense, a flustered Sarah could only stammer his name. She stands frozen as the blonde student continues his mockery, addressing Hermes with false deference. He posits that a true mage should be adept with both sword and sorcery, unlike Sarah, who he claims can do neither. He adds that if she had even a modicum of swordsmanship, her treatment might be different. The incessant chatter grates on Hermes, his gaze sharpening with irritation. He internally notes how noisy the student is, his sudden intensity causing the bullies to flinch. Deciding to end the confrontation, he takes Sarah's hand to lead her away. He apologizes for the scene, explaining it's too noisy and suggests they find somewhere else to talk, adding that he might be able to help with the problem. As they begin to walk, Sarah stammers for him to wait, while the onlookers are left stunned. His departure is cut short by the blonde student's furious shout, demanding to know why Hermes would support someone like Sarah. Turning back slightly, Hermes replies with cold clarity that the reason is obvious. He simply cannot stand people like the bully. He presses the point, questioning if the student possesses enough talent to justify looking down on others. Hermes dismisses mere decency with a sword or magic as insufficient grounds for such arrogance, leaving the bully momentarily speechless. The words strike their mark. The bully grits his teeth, sweat beading on his brow as Sarah observes with a flicker of satisfaction. Hermes continues his verbal assault, suggesting that if the student is going to make such bold claims, then a man like him ought to be able to back them up. Provoked beyond reason, the student cuts him off, issuing a direct challenge. He declares that if Hermes is so superior, he must surely be able to achieve a higher score in swordsmanship. The sudden escalation leaves both Hermes and Sarah taken aback. He responds calmly that while he doesn't know the results yet, he has set high goals for himself. As an examiner in the background calls for the next participant, the bully dismisses the non-answer and roars for Hermes to prove his supposed superiority. Resigned to the escalating situation, Hermes sighs, realizing the confrontation is far from over. The blonde student, a manic grin spreading across his face, presses his advantage, demanding that Hermes display the genuine talent he was just speaking of. An examiner calls for Hermes von Lunicilia, instructing him to hand over his weapon and step onto the stage. As his friends watch, the arrogant blonde student scoffs that Hermes can just stand aside. Atlas encourages Hermes, telling him it's his turn, and Hermes agrees. He walks toward the stage, a faint smile on his lips, thinking to himself that he can't stop smiling. The final part of the exam is swordsmanship. He turns to Sarah, apologizing and asking her to wait. Artemis chimes in, promising to intervene if anyone bullies him, and Sarah quietly agrees. His opponent, the blonde student, greets him with a condescending tone, addressing him as the Lunicilia Duke's son. Internally, Hermes finds it difficult to restrain himself and not display the full extent of his training. Their blades meet. The student claims it is an honor to face a famed genius. Hermes expresses his appreciation, stating his intent to use this as an opportunity to learn from a real knight. The blonde student's eyes widen in recognition, identifying Hermes' stance as the Sunlight Duke style. As he expected, Hermes notes internally that his opponent has recognized the form. With the declaration to begin, the duel commences. Their swords clash, and Hermes immediately assesses that his opponent's physical strength is superior, though his speed is within expectations. The student presses a relentless assault, calling out a flurry of attacks. Hermes parries each one, confirming his initial judgment. His opponent was not going easy on him, and he had been correct not to hold back. He knew it. Surprised by the defense, the student remarks on Hermes' honest and direct sword paths. He attempts a feint, but Hermes reads the movement, identifying it as a star pattern. The student, frustrated, exclaims that he is not finished yet. In the heat of the exchange, he perceives a momentary slowing in his opponent's movements. This is the chance he was waiting for. Hermes lunges forward, seizing the opening to meet his opponent's blade with a powerful counterthrust. He leaps back, creating distance from his opponent. The blonde student, landing opposite him, grudgingly admits that Hermes is quite fast. The student stares, sweat beading on his brow, unable to believe his attack was blocked. He internally acknowledges that he hadn't expected Hermes to be this strong. Hermes, however, calmly confirms that he did block it, though he concedes it was a close call. He then casually informs his opponent that this is not his full strength, startling the blonde student. With a slight gesture, Hermes declares his intention to test him even further. The The provocation works. The blonde student grits his teeth in fury as he brings his sword up for a powerful overhead swing. Meanwhile, Hermes allows a small, confident smile to grace his lips, inwardly musing that the next part of their duel will be far more interesting. He lunges forward, closing the distance in an instant. Instead of using his sword, he strikes with his open palm, a technique he identifies as the hand-to-hand combat style he has been researching. The blonde student gasps in surprise and pain from the unexpected blow. The student reacts, attempting to use a knight's standard techniques, which include kicks and charges, to create space. But Hermes has already anticipated this. He knows that all he needs is an opening. While hand-to-hand combat has a shorter range, its attack speed is far superior to his sword's. The blonde student's face contorts in disbelief as he realizes Hermes has slipped completely inside his guard, where he can now attack freely. With his opponent's defenses breached and his weapon rendered ineffective at such close range, Hermes drives his fist forward in a powerful strike. The impact lands squarely, forcing a cry of pain from the blonde student as he is thrown off balance. He crumples to the floor, defeated. The instructor, Simon Gatiss, observes from the side, noting that the student has collapsed. Hermes stands over his fallen opponent, a hint of disappointment on his face, murmuring that he had wanted to test more of his theories. He turned from his defeated opponent, holding the disarmed sword out to the exam proctor. "Excuse me," he asked calmly. "Does this count as the end of the test?" The proctor, utterly flustered, could only stammer an affirmative. Nearby, Freya von Winter watched the exchange, her expression one of keen interest as she murmured to herself. The other students, including Artemis and Sarah, were frozen in a state of shock, while the blonde student Hermes had just bested was left agape with humiliation. Having concluded his match, Hermes turns to Artemis von Asta and offers his thanks. Nearby, Sarah Chrysanthemum watches in astonishment, impressed that he could defeat a knight so easily. Hermes then turns to her, apologizing for the wait. On the arena floor, the defeated instructor, Simon Gatiss, lies stunned. An exam proctor calls for a medic and orders the sword exam to be paused. Hermes explains that his victory was only possible because his opponent was caught by surprise, admitting that in pure swordsmanship, they were on roughly equal footing. He rejoins his companions, and Artemis asks about the 3 students he was concerned with earlier. Sarah remarks that from an amateur's viewpoint, he looked completely dominant and likely would have won even with just his sword. Hermes finds it difficult to respond. He decides to go check on them, but stops short. He sees the blonde student, Lorea's, and his friends looking completely vacant, as if they spaced out the moment their exam began. Seeing them like that, Hermes figures they are probably fine, but his attention is suddenly seized by an intense presence. His gaze lands on a striking young woman with silver hair, skin like snow, and an icy gaze. A tremor of recognition runs through him as he stammers her name. Freya. This is Freya von Winter, the daughter of the revered sword saint, Greel von Winter. She is also one of the main heroines from the world of the game, Love Sorcerer. She strides directly toward him, her presence commanding. "Lunacelia Air," she states coolly. "I need a word." Freya closes the distance between them in an instant, causing Hermes to flinch back in surprise. She comments on his earlier match, noting that not even she had ever achieved such a flawless victory. Her intensity builds as she leans in, overwhelming him. "And that throwing technique?" she demands. "A new martial art? How exactly did you train to perform that?" Completely flustered, Hermes can only stammer that it was nothing complicated. She remains unconvinced, her face inches from his. "You sure?" she presses. Freya explains that she had always considered relying solely on a sword to be a risky strategy in case of disarmament. Under her piercing gaze, Hermes explains that it's simply a matter of getting used to it with enough repetition. He remains pinned by Freya, explaining that his throw was merely an improvised strength-based move. Freya leans closer, her grip unwavering, and counters that true throws require technique, using weight and momentum. Flustered, Hermes admits that he has never formally practiced martial arts. In response, Freya makes a proposition. She wants instruction in his style of hand-to-hand combat, which she notes resembles martial arts from the Eastern continent. As compensation, she offers to teach him her family's renowned winter swordsmanship. Hermes is taken aback, realizing this is a formal request and that the existence of a Japan-like country was never mentioned in the game. She presses her offer, acknowledging that while her house was built upon its unmatched swordsmanship, she desires his knowledge. Hermes processes the exchange, quickly understanding that this is not a bad deal at all. His mind races. All he has to do is teach his self-taught, almost nonsensical martial arts. In return, he would learn the sword style of the Winter family, the very lineage that produced a sword saint. He recalls observing Freya's dedicated training with Artemis during breaks, concluding that an opportunity like this is too valuable to pass up. Having reached a decision, he looks up at Freya and agrees, stating simply, "I'll teach you." Her intense expression immediately gives way to surprise at his straightforward acceptance. A radiant, blushing smile spreads across her face as she thanks him warmly, calling him Hermes Koshi. Her sudden change in demeanor catches him completely off guard, causing him to flinch and sputter. He quickly clears his throat, internally chastising himself for nearly reacting strangely. He recognizes her expression as the iconic snow-melting smile from a game. As he composes himself, his attention shifts to Sarah Chrysanthemum, who stands nearby, looking utterly dejected. She laments that she has nothing of value to offer him like Freya does. Recognizing an opportunity and recalling that her family is a merchant house that bought its title, Hermes turns and invites her to join them, much to her shock. He then confirms with a hesitant Sarah that her family deals in commerce, noting their reputation as one of the top merchant houses in the capital. She timidly affirms his statement. When Sarah questions how this arrangement benefits him, Hermes reveals his strategic thinking. He explains that building ties with a merchant's daughter will be useful later and makes his request priority in purchasing her family's new products. The practical appeal of his offer is not lost on her. He observed Sarah, recognizing her determination. While he genuinely couldn't ignore someone being bullied, his strategic mind was also at work. He knew that once he leveled up, the items her family's company produced would be essential. To formalize their new partnership, he explained that any business deal between them must be fair, emphasizing that what truly mattered were her own desires. Sarah, taken aback by his consideration, stammered, struggling to find her words. Gathering her resolve, she looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears as she declared her wish aloud, to become strong enough that she would never be mocked again. Hearing this, Artemis conceded that it might be useful. Sarah then turned to Freya, asking if she would join them as well. Freya calmly agreed, noting that her father taught swordsmanship to subordinates anyway, so one more would be fine. In exchange, she requested priority purchase rights. With the agreement settled, Freya and Artemis departed for the time being. Hermes formally requested their cooperation, prompting a deep, grateful bow from Sarah. He felt a thrill of excitement at the prospect of a mutual exchange of techniques. Elsewhere, in a training yard, Eurysthea watched as Atlas began his sword practice, surprised that he had already started. From a distance, Hermes observed the scene, a deep sense of unease settling over him. He couldn't understand what was happening with Atlas, the man who was supposed to be the main character of this world. A month and a half had passed, a period that should have provided countless opportunities to increase his power, yet he seemed unchanged. Atlas laughed to himself, admitting he could barely do anything, which only deepened Hermes' suspicions. It wasn't just his lack of progress. Atlas had shown no reaction to the danger during Manurva's kidnapping attempt, and his oddly high fondness for Hermes was also strange. He realized Atlas must have known he was being watched. Walking with Artemis later, his mind raced, connecting the dots. The suspicious aura in the capital, the list from Artemis's father, and now Atlas's behavior. It all pointed to one conclusion. Though the main story seemed to be on track, something was fundamentally wrong. The question of what this world truly was echoed in his thoughts. Far away, in a dark, torch-lit passage, a single drop of water fell into a still puddle, its ripples spreading into the oppressive silence. In a dark, undisclosed location, a group of masked men stands guard. One, holding a large scythe, looks over his shoulder as another complains that the results of their latest operation were pathetic. Their failure is the subject of a tense discussion nearby. A man with spiky hair grips his sword, demanding to know what is happening. A woman with long, light hair explains that security has been tightened since their subordinates failed in noble girl kidnapping. A third man expresses his frustration, wondering if the captured grunts properly disposed of themselves. The woman is unsure, but coldly remarks that nobles will likely kill them soon enough. His anger builds as he glares past a set of bars at a group of terrified, crying children huddled together in a cage. He clicks his tongue in annoyance, declaring the captured children to be unsatisfying. The group confirms their next move. They will head to the surface to scout the Magic Academy. Meanwhile, with the school exams finished, the weekend begins. Hermes is ecstatic, announcing to his maid Fran that his plan is set. He's heading to the beginner dungeon, Dark Cloud Forest, to get a boss drop and level up. Fran chases after him, pleading for him to stop. He successfully evades her and arrives at his destination, stepping into the dense, overgrown foliage of the Dark Cloud Forest. Pushing through the thick leaves, he assesses his surroundings. The visibility is terrible, and the so-called forest is practically a jungle. He hopes he can finish his task quickly. His current capabilities are formidable. At level 30, his strength, vitality, agility, and intelligence are all exceptionally high at 97. His proficiency with all 6 magical elements, fire, water, wind, earth, holy, and dark, is at intermediate 40, complemented by his beginner-level swordsmanship and maximum charisma. He presses onward through the jungle-like terrain until he discovers a large, circular stone set into the ground, marked with a glowing sigil. He recognizes it as the entrance to the boss area. Peering into the dark, cavernous opening, a confident smile spreads across his face. He has finally arrived. He steps into the chamber, and the ground trembles as the dungeon's master reveals itself. The Dark Cloud Forest boss, a colossal venom serpent covered in thick, dark armor, has finally appeared. Despite the overwhelming presence of the beast, a confident, almost eager, smile spreads across Hermes' face. The colossal venom serpent strikes with blinding speed. Hermes recognizes it as a massive poisonous snake, whose every attack inflicts a status ailment. He knows he has antidotes in his inventory, but the immediate priority is to avoid being hit at all. The beast lunges, its maw wide for a bite. As it moves, Hermes notes its coiled posture, realizing that fighting something so huge and fast is a true challenge. It unleashes a furious barrage, a headlong rush, a snapping bite, a cloud of poison mist, and a sweeping whip of its tail. Hermes deftly evades each successive assault. Having weathered the storm of attacks, a realization dawns on him. The creature's attack patterns are exactly the same as in a game. His first course of action, he decides, is to take an antidote. He reconsiders his approach. He knows he must use his sword, but the serpent resists magic. Furthermore, they are in a forest. Using fire magic could cause a disastrous blaze. An idea sparks in his mind. The beast's resistance is external. What about its insides? He reasons that if he injects magic directly into it, it might just work. A determined smile forms as he focuses on his plan. He channels his power, and with a bright flash, his sword begins to glow with magical energy. All right, success, he thinks, pleased with the result. His blade now crackles with power. He declares internally that with this enchant ability, he can finally use fire magic. Across the clearing, the venom serpent watches, letting out a low rumble. He charges forward, his enchanted sword striking the serpent's armored hide with a resounding clang. Just as he suspected, the creature's magical resistance is only in its scales. A flush of excitement washes over him. He realizes he can raise both his swordsmanship and magic proficiency at the same time. This deadly encounter is the perfect method for grinding his skills. He watches the massive venom serpent writhe from the internal explosion, mockingly telling it to calm down. As the beast thrashes about, he carefully aims at the ground and casts another enchant, declaring that he is far from finished. In response, the serpent lunges forward with fangs bared. Unfazed, he holds his ground, sword at the ready, realizing he still has more techniques to test on this powerful foe. He drops into a low, ready stance, a confident smirk spreading across his face. With this new approach, he thinks to himself, the monster's incredible speed is now useless. The serpent is now surrounded by pillars of shattered earth, a consequence of his ground-targeted enchantments. He coolly assesses the trapped beast, wondering aloud just how many hits it will take to finally defeat it. Without waiting for an answer, he launches his assault, becoming a blur of motion as he weaves between the earthen pillars, landing a rapid succession of strikes against the serpent's armored body. His blade flashes again and again, reaching a 10th hit. He notes how tough the creature is, but as he lands another blow, he realizes the shattered ground is making his footing unstable. Despite the unstable ground, he leaps high into the air, his enchanted sword glowing with immense power. Declaring that the serpent is finished, he calls for the stored magic to explode, triggering a powerful detonation on the monster's body. He hangs in the air for a moment, looking down as a massive column of smoke and magical energy erupts from the serpent below, obscuring it from view. Having held out for a surprisingly long time, the massive venom serpent finally collapses within a ring of fire, its body beginning to dissolve into particles of light as Hermes watches. As the creature vanishes completely, he offers his thanks. The prolonged battle allowed him to create a powerful magic spell and, as a bonus, secure an item drop. He decides not to waste a single second. Knowing it will take a few minutes for the next monster to respawn, he resolves to continue grinding against every creature in the area, immediately storing his new acquisition in his inventory. True to his word, he launches into a relentless series of battles, efficiently dispatching a variety of fantastical monsters one after another. His training session is a whirlwind of motion and power, as he unleashes devastating attacks that tear through his foes and the very ground they stand on. Throughout the day, he slaughters a large number of venom serpents, collecting their drops and amassing vast experience. A review of his status shows the results. He has reached level 35, with his swordsmanship and all magic proficiencies now at the intermediate level. He trained for so long that night has fallen. The realization dawns on him, and he decides he must hurry back to the academy before his maid, Fran, begins to worry. Upon his return, however, he is met with an unsettling scene. A large crowd of students is gathered near the academy entrance, their collective presence creating a tense atmosphere. He stops, sensing immediately that something is wrong. His unease grows as he approaches the murmuring crowd. He overhears the shocking news that Manurva has been kidnapped. He asks aloud if something happened at the academy, his face etched with disbelief. A student confirms that a suspicious person appeared and abducted Manurva. Hermes' shock turns to fury. He grabs the student, demanding to know what they mean and where Manurva was taken, but the terrified students have no answers. Euryshia and Artemis call out his name in alarm at his fierce reaction. He grits his teeth, the reality of the situation sinking in. No matter the circumstances, Manurva has been taken. He questions how she could have been kidnapped in broad daylight from within the supposedly secure magic academy, without any guards or teachers noticing. He knows he cannot let this stand. With a sharp turn, he sprints away, leaving his companions behind. As he races through the academy grounds, A single thought dominates his mind: how to track her. He recognizes that this event was never part of the original game scenario, forcing him to improvise. His mind races, weighing his options. He doubts the game's protagonist would even attempt to rescue Manurva. And even if he did, Hermes questions if he would be strong enough to defeat a night-level opponent. That's why he must act. He considers his own power, wishing for a detection spell like those found in other games he's played. Suddenly, a realization dawns on him. That's it. With newfound resolve, he declares that if such a spell doesn't exist, he will create one himself. He realizes he can combine parallel casting and enchantment magic to achieve his goal. He can do this. He begins the incantation, levitating slightly as magical energy swirls around him. He hopes desperately that Manurva is still close. His plan is to modify a standard detection spell, link his senses to his mana, and then expand it outward like sonar to scan the entire area. He knows the spell will consume more mana the farther it reaches, but with his supply of recovery items, that isn't a concern. His mana flows outward from his body, a vast, invisible wave spreading across the academy. He pushes the spell's range, extending it wider and wider to cover more ground. The magical sonar sweeps across the landscape, a grid of pure energy mapping everything it touches. It registers a faint anomaly. The feedback returns to him, painting a picture in his mind. He senses an open space and multiple human silhouettes located underground. The presence extends even deeper. He grimaces, realizing it must be a hidden bandit hideout. His focus sharpens on a specific mana pattern among the others. His eyes snap open with fierce determination. He has found her. A grim thought crosses his mind. It seems saving the heroine is now part of a mob character's job description.